Chapter 78. Mission completed. Reward, a new variety of mushrooms. Mission. As a knight, one not only needs courage and wisdom, but also enough life-saving ability to display the greatest significance of life. Please learn Marcus' complete set of archery. Reward, black pearls from the deep sea. After the logging work on the Thorns Ridge Passage was completed, the smoke mission was updated in time. A new variety of mushrooms was apparently growing somewhere in the Shiitake settlement and was about to be discovered. List had enough patience to wait. Black pearls from the deep sea, what are they? He was somewhat confused. However, pearls on the market were not cheap. They were relatively popular accessories for aristocrats. Black pearls should be more valuable and could be sold for a lot of money. Recently, he had been so poor that he could hardly afford to pay his wages. He was thinking about money like crazy. Learning archery from Marcus was a plan that was put on the agenda a long time ago. Starting tomorrow, I will officially learn archery. Tomorrow doesn't seem to be possible. Marcus has to go to the Coral City to pick up his family. Let's start the day after tomorrow. First, have the caravan go to Tulip Castle and help me buy a bow and arrows. On the Coral Island, only a few aristocratic families were allowed to sell weapons. List, on the other hand, didn't need to go to Tulip Castle to buy one. After all, he was a direct descendant of the Tulip family. Early the next morning, under the leadership of Old Grandette, the newly formed Flower Town's caravan, consisting of 3 merchants, 6 coachmen, and 7 assistants, set off for the Coral City with the castle's 6 old horses. On the backs of each batch of horses, there were a few packets of seafood as well as a few pots and firewood. This was for cooking seafood on the spot. Riding his yellow-gray horse, Marcus followed the caravan and escorted it in passing. The Knight Squad's training course was temporarily handed over to retainer Knight Karl Hammerstein. He was the only retainer knight who already had a sense of chi and was about to cultivate chi. As for the other 3 retainer knight, there was no sign of chi so far. As for the Knight Squad, the youngsters had eaten their fill during this time and trained hard. Their muscles had already begun to bulge. Philip Wool and Xavier Cow Dung, who had the best physiques and had reached the standards of Knight Academy, had already begun to sense chi and could cultivate chi at any time. Blair also went with the caravan to pick up his family and settled down in the Flower Town. Gort and Isaiah, whose families were unwilling or inconvenient to come, continued to maintain the town's administrative operations. There was still a lot of work to be done. The roads were still being repaired, the oyster settlement's houses were still being built, the wasteland was still being reclaimed, and a new and important work had also begun to be planned. Teacher Gort, Isaiah, the town needs to be reorganized. Probably tomorrow Marcus and Blair's families will arrive. Arrange for their accommodation as soon as possible. They're all big families, so they can't continue to live in the administrative office. Don't worry, sir. I've already considered this last night. I've already rented 2 houses next to the administrative office for Marcus and Blair's families to stay temporarily. Gort's tone became more and more respectful. He had already followed List for the sake of his upcoming illegitimate child. Following List meant that he had become List's subject. It was no longer just an equal relationship of nobility and the friendship between teacher and student. I'm glad that you've thought of things ahead of me. List was satisfied with Gort's current attitude. Then let's continue with the town's plan. In about 3 months, a group of 500 serfs and freedmen will settle down in the Flower Town. The settlements will have to build more houses and the town will have to be expanded. Gort already knew that List wanted to sell slaves. He asked directly, how will this group of commoners be distributed? How many serfs will there be? If nothing unexpected happens, there will be 400 serfs to supplement the settlement's farming. There will be 100 freedmen, most of whom are craftsmen. As appropriate, some workshops will be planned in the town. A simple map of the town was spread out. List drew a horizontal line with his finger on the original only street and said, we will build another road so that the town is laid out in the shape of a cross. This is not a small project. 3 months may not be enough. Let's build it first. List was not an expert. He could not accurately budget and long-term planning. He often did what he thought of, the streets must be spacious. The 4 areas of the cross will be divided into the east, south, west, and north. The west will be planned as a commercial area. Later, the exchange and food market will be built. The development of the social system in this world was very backward. The cities were more like densely packed dilapidated houses with no concept of a planned area. But List was not willing to do this. The south will be planned as a workshop area. Later, mills, slaughterhouses, and blacksmiths will be moved to this area. The north will be a serf residential area and the east will be a free residential area. In addition, further west of the commercial area near the castle, will be planned as an aristocratic residential area. It was very immoral to divide people into different classes. But this was the social system. It was impossible for aristocrats to live with commoners, and freedmen and serfs could not be in the same pot. After carefully thinking about List's words, Gort couldn't help but exclaim, "Sir, your idea is really unique. It has opened my mind. It turns out that a city can be built in this way. In this way, no matter how far away a merchant is, they will still be able to find a place to do business." Isaiah was a little slow, but after listening to Gort's explanation, he also understood the benefits of urban planning. It is also an eye-opener for me. The flower town will become a pearl of the coral island. List smiled slightly. Most importantly, more toilets must be built. I don't want to see anyone urinating and defecating in the town, even if it is a 3-year-old child. Immediately after, he added, hang signs in every shop, hang conspicuous signs in every toilet, and set up signs at the entrances to the roads. No matter who comes to the flower town in the future, they must abide by the rule of not urinating and defecating anywhere. He had a deep feeling about this, because just a few days ago, during the Out to the Sea festival, the Count's accompanying knight had defecated more than a dozen times in the vicinity of his castle at noon. For many knights this was a normal thing. If they wanted to defecate they would do it. But List didn't allow it. He didn't want to stroll in the horse field and accidentally step on a pile of feces. As natives, Gort and Isaiah didn't care about this. They had done things like urinating and defecating everywhere before. But List had already ordered them to do so. They nodded in agreement. Sir, please rest assured. We will give top priority to the town's hygiene. List suddenly remembered something. By the way, Isaiah, my night squad's youngsters are illiterate. I hope to hire you as the night squad's teacher to teach them common words. At the very least, they must be able to read. There was no night college in the flower town, so he could only hire teachers. Chapter 79. The caravan did not return at night. Instead, it waited until noon the next day before returning to the flower town. 2 of the 6 carriages were full of goods, while the other 4 carried Marcus and Blair's family members. The 6 horses were exhausted and the single carriage was a bit overloaded. Sir. Marcus dismounted and saluted. Soon, a large group of people alighted from the carriages behind him. Teacher Marcus, if I remember correctly, you don't have so many family members, do you? List carefully counted. Marcus's family alone had 22 people. My 2 elder sisters and their family are also willing to follow me to the flower town to settle down. Marcus replied, they live in poverty in the Coral City, mainly because they have too many children. Even though I often provide them with financial assistance, it is still difficult for them to have enough to eat and wear. List nodded. He always welcomed people. Soon after, Blair's family also saluted him. Blair's family wasn't that large, just his wife and 4 children. His eldest son had just been married and had yet to have children. List had Gort settled down the 2 families. Only then did List begin to inquire about the caravan's business. Old Grandette said nervously, Sir, not many portions of seafood were sold. Half of it was given to the Coral City citizens as free food. In fact, many of the citizens who had tasted seafood said that it was delicious. However, one person who had eaten seafood had red spots all over his body, vomiting and having diarrhea, which led to the citizens' fear of seafood. Harpagon added, if the patrol hadn't heard that the caravan belonged to you, Sir Lord, then I'm afraid that all of our goods would have been confiscated. Allergic to seafood? List mused. Some people were indeed allergic to seafood. However, none of the flower town's residents were allergic to seafood. This made him believe that people would not be allergic to the other world's seafood. He didn't expect that there would be people allergic to seafood. It is indeed unexpected. However, you don't have to feel pressured. Very few people will have physical problems due to eating seafood. However, this is only a small minority. Once a problem arises, immediately stop and recover. Next time you sell seafood, remember to make it clear. Yes, Sir Lord. Have you purchased all the things I need? Thick bast paper, dried milk powder, hops, beer, red wine? Everything has been purchased, but the pig pancreas you needed, we were unable to buy it. The few slaughterhouses in Coral City do not keep pig pancreas. I've already contacted them and asked them to keep the pig pancreas as much as possible. We'll buy it next time. Pig pancreas is used to make pancreas, which is also used to make soap. The castle now used soap powder, a kind of powder ground from the fruit of the honey locust tree. There were soap makers among the new serfs, who could add flower petals to the soap powder and make soap. However, the production of soap was very complicated. The soap maker, Burnell, did not have the equipment and had yet to make the soap. Therefore, Liszt hoped to make his own pancreas. After old Grandet reported the situation, he prepared to hand over the money to Liszt. Of course, Liszt would not accept it with his hands. It would be beneath his status. Liszt picked up the cup on the table and said lightly, "Mr. Carter, you and old Grandet will be responsible for the castle's purchases in the future." "As you wish, master." Carter accepted the task without hesitation. Marcus's family and Blair's family had dinner in the castle. Liszt no longer asked about their arrangements and directly left it to Gort. As a lord, his most important job was to enjoy himself. "Master, there is a small matter in the Shiitake settlement. I don't know if you are interested in hearing it." While Mrs. Morrison was cleaning the study with Maggie, she said to Liszt, who was reading a night novel to pass the time, "Shiitake settlement?" Liszt instantly thought of his mission reward, a new variety of mushrooms. What happened in the Shiitake settlement? Most of the shiitake used in the castle is picked from Crooked Neck Bob's house. His family's shiitake is the most tender. But these days Bob is often frowning. On the shelf where he grows shiitake, a kind of bright red shiitake grows. When he shovels a batch, another batch will grow. Before he finished, Liszt immediately stood up from his chair and walked out of the study without looking back. He shouted upstairs, "Thomas, prepare the horse." Thomas, who was about to sleep, hurriedly ran out of the room and hurriedly prepared the horse. Carter also quickly walked over. "Master, do you have something important to do tonight?" "It's very important. I have to go to the Shiitake settlement." "Send someone to inform Gort." He suddenly remembered something. He turned to the housekeeper in the study and said, "Mrs. Morrison, come with me. Lead the way to Crooked Neck Bob's house." A moment later, Thomas prepared the horse. He lit a torch and walked under the moonlight towards the Shiitake settlement. The manservant Jesse rode a horse to the town and called Gort and Liszt's 4-retainer knight to meet up with Liszt in the Shiitake settlement. The Shiitake settlement was noisy for a while. Crooked Neck Bob was extremely nervous. Mrs. Morrison knocked on the door and told him that the Sir Lord wanted to go to his shiitake shed. He thought that there was a problem with his shiitake, and that the Sir Lord was going to hold him accountable. As a serf, he was responsible for farming for the Lord. If he did not do well, he would be whipped. "Bob, don't be nervous. Master is merciful. You didn't make a deliberate mistake, he won't punish you easily." "Mrs. Morrison, is this true? You must help me plead with the Sir Lord, please, please." Bob was still nervous. At this time, Liszt was already in his shiitake shed. Thomas followed closely with a torch. "Master, what are you looking for?" "I've found what I'm looking for." Liszt's pupils rotated like whirlpools, and a little bit of starlight seemed to twinkle in the deep and boundless universe. In his field of vision, there were several pieces of rotten shiitake wood, which had traces of light red magic power, outlining the shapes of mushrooms. He dispersed his magic eyes. By the light of the fire he saw what was emitting magic power. It was a bright red mushroom. It looked a bit like a red mushroom, dotted in the middle of a large field of shiitake. It was obvious that the surrounding shiitake had withered, except for this red mushroom, which looked very fresh and bright. It really is a magic ingredient mushroom. Liszt wanted to laugh out loud because the magic power of this mushroom is red. This is a color that only fire-attributed magic power can have. I am a fire-attributed warrior chi. This red mushroom is a great tonic for me. The Sky Knight was basically a medicine pot. Without a lot of magic ingredients, it was difficult to rely on his own body to attack a higher realm of chi. "Thomas, have Mrs. Morrison bring Bob over." When Bob stood nervously in front of him, he smiled and said, "Are you Bob? Don't be nervous." Bob was so scared that he knelt down and kept kowtowing. "Sir Lord, I made a mistake, I spoiled the shiitake ingredients, Sir Lord, please forgive me." Chapter 80. Crooked Neck Bob was so excited that he couldn't sleep all night. Not only did Sir Lord not blame him, but he was even rewarded with 10 silver coins. This was simply like a pie falling from the sky. Moreover, Sir Lord also told him to find a way to expand the planting area of the red mushrooms. Sir Lord had given them a name, flame mushrooms. It would be best if all the shiitake were replaced with flame mushrooms. The more they were planted, the more rewards they would receive in the future. Quiet. The tomato settlement's Johann received a gold coin as a reward from Sir Lord. His wife couldn't bear to see Bob getting too excited and couldn't help but pour cold water on him. Bob didn't care in the slightest. What do you know? It is only a reward of 10 silver coins because Sir Lord wants me to figure out the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms. I, Bob, am the best at planting shiitake in the shiitake settlement. As long as I figure out the ingredients, Sir Lord said that there will be more rewards. He had a longing look on his face. It will definitely be more than Johan's 1 gold coin. Perhaps, it will be 2 gold coins? Heavens, what a wonderful moment. I have 2 gold coins. However, you have to figure out the ingredients first. If you don't, then Sir Lord might take back the 10 silver coins and whip you. Of course I will figure it out, I will figure it out. Of course, Bob wouldn't be the only one to figure out the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms. List had already consulted with Gort, who had hurried over to gather all the shiitake planting experts in the shiitake settlement to figure it out together. Whoever could figure out the recipe of the ingredients would be rewarded. List didn't have many gold coins left, but he wasn't stingy. He wanted to use the magic of money to arouse the subjects' enthusiasm for exploring new things, rather than continuing to lifelessly repeat the farming methods of the older generation. Teacher Gort, the planting ingredients for the flame mushrooms will be classified as the Flower Town's top secret and must not be divulged to anyone. Henceforth, all places where the flame mushrooms are planted will be classified as restricted areas. Only with the castle's authorization can one enter and exit these areas. List said solemnly. Ordinary plant magic ingredients required sprite worms to coordinate with them, which were very difficult to replicate. For example, the magic tulip could only be grown by the tulip family. Even if an outsider stole the seed without the tulip elves to cultivate it, it would degenerate into a normal tulip in less than 1 or 2 generations. Mushroom potions, on the other hand, were different. They could be multiplied continuously. Once the spores and ingredients were stolen by outsiders, they could be cultivated on a large scale with a little research. Gort understood the importance of this matter. Sir, please rest assured. I will discuss with Isaiah a set of confidential plans to ensure that there is no possibility of the slightest possibility of the cultivation method of the flame mushrooms being leaked. You have to be more careful. This is a magic ingredient mushroom. You can't pay too much attention to it. Understood. Gort nodded and then sighed with emotion. In a short period of time, the Flower Town has changed greatly. 2 sprite worms and 2 magic ingredients have been born. This land is definitely blessed by the Knight's glory. My lord, you must be the successor of the Knight's glory. The glory of the Knight was a slogan that the nobles loved to say. This world had a very medieval style, yet it had not developed a religion that ruled over almost everything. This was probably because humans could cultivate themselves and reach the realm of invincible experts, free from disease and calamity. Therefore they were dismissive of God, and even had the feeling that, I am God. The nobles only believed in the glory of the Knight. The cultivation of chi, continuously becoming a more powerful knight, could bring them everything. Of course there were also exceptions. Wizards definitely did not believe in the glory of the Knight. Reportedly they believed in knowledge. List calmly looked at the clear moonlight. If there really was a knight's glory, then he believed that he was indeed blessed by the knight's glory, giving him a wonderful life experience. I hope to ride a dragon one day. Marcus arrived at the castle early. Starting today he would teach List archery. My archery is called multiple arrows, an advanced extension of fundamental archery. It focuses on the control of multiple arrows, not the power of the arrows. My lord does not have the foundation of archery, so you cannot learn multiple arrows for the time being. You must first start with fundamental archery. Saying so, he handed over a bundle of arrows. This is? List had bought a bow from Tulip Castle, a hard bow suitable for an earth knight, and also 100 birch arrows. The arrows are made from the feathers of the winged peregrine falcon and oak from the Thorn's Ridge. The falcon feather arrows are all handmade by me, a total of 24 arrows. Among them, there are 6 falcon tail arrows made from the tail feathers of the winged peregrine falcon. In order to distinguish them, I drew a red circle on the arrow shafts. The falcon tail arrows are more balanced than the falcon feather arrows. Marcus somewhat regretfully said, unfortunately most of the feathers of the winged peregrine falcon were destroyed by the monkeys. Otherwise, a large number of falcon feather arrows could be made, which are much better than the ordinary bird feather arrows on the market. The fine magic power on the feathers can make the arrows fly faster and more steadily. The winged peregrine falcon, after fighting with the monkeys, had all of its feathers scratched off. Then List used a big move, burning a lot of its feathers. Being able to repair and make 24 falcon feather arrows was already not easy. However, List didn't take the falcon feather arrows, I still haven't learned archery, so I can't use the falcon feather arrows for the time being. Teacher Marcus, keep them. When we clean up World of Warcraft in the Thorns Ridge, we will need to rely on Teacher Marcus's accurate archery. Marcus didn't decline. Yes, my lord. Next was teaching time. As a sharpshooter, Marcus had a very deep understanding of archery, and his teaching method was also very clear. List quickly immersed himself in learning archery. As an Earth Knight, his physical constitution was very tough. He could continuously shoot arrows, which was much more convenient than ordinary people learning archery. The smoke mission is for me to learn Marcus's complete set of archery. In other words, just learning the basic archery isn't enough, I also have to learn the multiple arrows. I have to speed up my learning, otherwise this mission will take too long. For this reason, List even suspended his chi cultivation. He wholeheartedly immersed himself in archery. As a result, on the horse field outside the castle, there was a constantly galloping shadow. That was List constantly shooting arrows on horseback, shooting at various erected targets. He learned very quickly. After a day he could already stand still and shoot at the bullseye. 9 out of 10 arrows could hit the 7 or 8 ring position. The Earth Knight's mastery of the body could quickly strengthen his muscle memory, allowing him to figure out how to shoot more accurately. After 2 days he could already hit the target 5 out of 10 arrows on horseback. On the 4th day, List continued to go to the horse field, preparing to practice archery on horseback. However, a shameful act occurred on the horse field. Black Dragon rode on Fiery Dragon for about 4 minutes before it dismounted and pretended to be leisurely, lowering its head to graze. Chapter 81. Black Dragon was a dragon stallion. In order to develop the Black Dragon herd, the quality of the maras could not be too poor. Fiery Dragon was the most suitable breeding partner. However, there was only one Fiery Dragon. Therefore, horses that could go to the battlefield could be used as breeding partners. Marcus Mount, the yellow-gray horse, was a horse breed that could go to the battlefield, but it was a stallion. Gort, Isaiah, and Blair's horses could go to the battlefield. Furthermore, they were maras. Maras generally did not go to the battlefield as they were more docile. They were suitable for aristocrats or aristocratic descendants who did not love the battlefield. I think we will soon have no horses to ride on. Gort looked at his mount, which was being whipped to its heart's content by Black Dragon. It was unknown what expression he had on his face. Most importantly, the mare clearly hadn't entered the estrus period. Black Dragon had forced himself on her. This was List's bad taste. His mount, Fiery Dragon, had already been defiled by Black Dragon. Naturally, other people's mounts could not be spared. There was a smile on Marcus's face. It was unknown whether he was gloating over Gort's misfortune, or looking forward to the future of the Flower Town's horses. He simply said, even pregnant maras can be ridden for about 11 months. You can ride them before 7 months, but after 7 months, you have to reduce the number of times you can ride them. Additionally, they should not gallop for long distances as it will increase the risk of miscarriage. Marcus knew horses very well. However, he was not the one who knew horses the best in the Flower Town. The one who knew horses the best was the serf from the Smallkerchief Island, One-Eyed Barton. He had once transported horses for the Smallkerchief family, traveled north and south, drank water from behind a toilet, and had seen many kinds of horses. Sir Lord, I have never seen a horse more spirited than Black Dragon. It must have an extraordinary bloodline. One-Eyed Barton was about 45 years old, had a thick beard and was blind in one eye. In order to examine his expertise, List had him identify Black Dragon. Then what lineage do you think it has? I've seen horses with low-level World of Warcraft bloodline. The fire dragon that Sir Lord often rides is of low-level World of Warcraft bloodline. I've seen a hybrid between a dark demonic horse and an ordinary horse in World of Warcraft. It was a new breed bred in a horse farm in the Blast Castle Kingdom. While speaking, Barton shook his head, but that breed of horse is not as spirited as Black Dragon. It is taller than Black Dragon, but its eyes and spirit are lacking. That's why I'm guessing that its mixed bloodline is even higher than Intermediate World of Warcraft, or Advanced World of Warcraft, I'm not sure. He already had a very high estimation of Black Dragon's bloodline, but there was still a gap. This was a dragon horse. List didn't plan on saying it out loud. He had to keep a low profile, so he asked One-Eyed Barton a few more questions about horses. One-Eyed Barton's answers were clear and logical. So he directly said, Barton, tell me your surname. One-Eyed Barton's complexion darkened. Sir Lord, Barton used to be an orphan without a surname. I was raised by a horse dealer. Later, Lord Smallkerchief bought Barton from the Blast Castle Kingdom, and I've been selling horses for Lord Smallkerchief. Is that so? List nodded. Have you ever been married? No. Not married meant that it didn't matter if he had a surname or not. If he married and had descendants, he would have to pass it on. At that time, Barton would probably change his name to One-Eyed Barton. In that case, you don't have to plow the fields. I'm hiring you as the castle's groom. You'll be responsible for managing the horse farm and taking care of the castle's horses. Barton happily kowtowed. Barton will definitely take good care of Sir's horse farm. Groom not only meant raising horses, but also a servant of the castle. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. In the aristocratic system, servants were a very important link. They shouldered all the castle's work and maintained the castle's internal operations. Basically, servants could be divided into 5 categories: upstairs servants, retainer knight, downstairs servants, kitchen servants, and outdoor servants. Upstairs servants included tutors, family doctors, and elderly noblemen's attendants. They generally didn't live in the castle, but they could eat with the noblemen upstairs. Retainer knight included squires who did odd jobs on the battlefield and squires who fought together with the noblemen. They had their own families. Downstairs servants included housekeepers, manservants, and maids. They were the castle's main staff and lived downstairs. Kitchen servants included servants who worked in the kitchen. In addition, there were outdoor servants. This was a general term because it included groom, coachman, forest protector, hunter protector, gatekeeper, gardener, and so on. They generally lived in independent houses outside the castle. Usually they didn't work in the castle. Instead, they raised horses, raised flowers, hunted, and so on. If it was a great noble, the servants would be further subdivided. In the hall, there were concierge, caterer, bartender, laundry servant, housekeeper, personal room servant, secretary, clothing servant, horse trainer, dog trainer, funny clown, zither player, drummer, flute player, and so on. In short, as long as the nobleman needed it, they could hire a servant for anything. For commoners, becoming a servant was something worth mentioning. Compared to serfs, servants obviously enjoyed a better life and did lighter work. Moreover, between noblemen, servant relationships were established. It was common for lesser noblemen to become servants of greater noblemen. For example, Gort, as a down-and-out Lord Knight, was List's tutor. Even the Earl of Coral Island, the Sky Knight who held the power of life and death on the island, was proud to be a groom for the Sapphire Grand Duke. The longer List lived in the small town's castle, the more he felt that there was no equality between people. Take care of Black Dragon first, Barton. It has been working very hard recently, and I don't want to see it tired out on a certain mare one day. List looked at Black Dragon, who worked hard day and night, and said solemnly. Barton carefully observed Black Dragon's teeth through the gap between its mouth. It is still a young horse, so it is normal to be a little restless. Now that the weather is getting hotter and hotter, its estrus will gradually weaken over time. However, the number of times it copulates with each mare has to be divided. First of all, ensure that Fiery Dragon gets pregnant. Understood, Master. Barton quickly played the role of a groom and called List Master. In order to get Fiery Dragon pregnant as soon as possible, List no longer planned to ride Black Dragon or Fiery Dragon. He switched to an ordinary horse and continued to practice archery. In mid-July, when he could move quickly while riding an ordinary horse, he hit all the targets one by one and didn't deviate too far from the bullseye. Marcus announced that he had officially graduated from the basic archery and could start practicing the multiple arrows. At the very most, he had only learned it for a week. Therefore, he was very confident in learning the multiple arrows and expected to completely master it by the time August arrived. Master your ice cream. Thomas brought over a cup of fragrant ice cream. List, who was still diligently practicing archery in the hot weather, picked up the ice cream and ate it in big mouthfuls. A cool feeling spread from head to toe, and the comfortable taste was wonderful. If he didn't have the help of ice cream, cold beer, and cold juice, he would never practice archery in the middle of summer. Fortunately, the mining of the super small saltpeter mine had already been completed, and they had obtained a total of 300 kilograms of saltpeter, which was enough to produce enough ice for the castle to use every day. At night, List would put a few pieces of ice in his study and bedroom to cool down. Chapter 82. Multiple Arrows didn't have any combat energy training content, so it wasn't a combat energy secret manual, but it was a combat energy technique. A knight of any attribute could practice it. It was divided into 3 levels: double arrows, triple arrows, and multiple arrows, as well as an ultimate move, multiple phantom arrows. Marcus, riding the yellow-gray horse, carefully demonstrated the multiple arrows that he had practiced, and then explained each arrow in conjunction with it. There are 5 ways to use double arrows. The most common one I use is double arrows at the same time, which is to simply shoot 2 arrows and hit one target. The second is double arrows cross, which is to shoot 2 arrows side by side and use magic to guide the impact, thus changing the direction in the air. The remaining double arrows spiral, double arrows chain, and double arrows rapid arrows aren't very practical. It was indeed difficult to control the horse and the arrows while riding on a horse. So what Marcus meant was that as long as one was proficient in double arrows at the same time and double arrows cross, they could already be called a godly archer and would be invincible on the battlefield. As for the other archery techniques, they could only be effective while standing on the ground and carefully practicing them. He continued, triple arrow is basically an advanced version of double arrow. 3 arrows in unison, 3 arrows in spiral, 3 arrows in chain, 3 arrows in rapid release, and 3 arrows in random release. The theory is the same, but the control requirements are higher. The same goes for multiple arrows. Multiple arrows at the same time, spiral shadow arrows, multiple arrows chain, multiple arrows random arrows, and multiple arrows cross require more control. After stopping the horse, Marcus could use triple arrows and multiple arrows one by one. After emptying the quiver, he shook his head, not satisfied with his archery skills. I can master triple arrows while standing still, but not multiple arrows. It's too difficult. There's also the ultimate move, multiple phantom arrows. I need at least a quarter of an hour to prepare this move before I dare to use it. A person's hand. Holding 1 arrow was very stable, holding 2 arrows was not bad, and holding 3 arrows was also fine, just enough space for 3 fingers to hold 1 arrow each. But holding more arrows was not possible. One had to hold 2 arrows between fingers, which was very difficult, not to mention that one had to allocate magic to guide each arrow. The Earth Knight's control of combat energy could not be so subtle. The squire plucked the arrows off the target one by one and handed them back to Marcus. Marcus let out a long sigh, trying to ease his tense emotions. Sir, it's already hard for me to control more than 3 multi-arrows. Now, it's even harder to control the ultimate profoundness. That's why I broke it down into 2 shots, 3 arrows each, which can barely achieve the effect recorded in multiple arrows. He pulled out 3 arrows from the quiver. The first 3 arrows use a gentle force, allowing the arrows to be thrown out at a low speed. The last 3 arrows use a violent force, allowing the arrows to be thrown out at a high speed and collide with the first 3 arrows. Thus, the speed of the 6 arrows reaches the same, and their trajectories are disrupted like phantoms. After that, he opened his mouth and bit down on the 3 arrows, then pulled out another 3 arrows and fired. The moment he let go, the 3 arrows flew upwards. He quickly put the 3 arrows in his mouth into his hand and once again drew the bow. This time, the bowstring was almost pulled into a full moon, and the moment the arrow was released, there was a violent whistling sound. Shio. 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 In midair, the 3 fast arrows flew in a flat trajectory, colliding with the arrows in front of them. In an instant, the 6 arrows spun in the air. Looking at it with the naked eye, it was as if dozens of arrows had suddenly appeared, randomly shooting at the 3 targets. Before Liszt could even blink, the phantoms dispersed, leaving only 6 arrows which hit the target in the middle. 5 of the arrows stuck straight into the target, but 1 brushed past the target and flew out. I still can't completely grasp the trajectories of the 6 arrows, Marcus said with some disappointment. But Liszt applauded. Teacher Marcus, your archery skills are already amazing. Let's quickly start practicing. I can't wait to use multi-phantom arrows. In reality, he felt a little bitter in his heart. Marcus's archery skills were simply unfathomable. He originally thought that it was just a routine of 2 or 3 arrows, and he just needed to learn it casually. But now he discovered that without being proficient in double arrow and triple arrow, he might not be able to learn multi-arrow, let alone the ultimate meaning of multi-phantom arrows. This is probably the most difficult smoke mission I have ever encountered. It was already halfway through July. He really wasn't sure if he could learn multi-arrow by the time August arrived. Although it was very difficult, he still had to do what he had to do. He decided to put down the burden of his thoughts and concentrate on learning archery. One day he would learn this complicated multi-arrow. Just as the Count had said at the Going Out to the Sea festival, "Don't be impatient, time is on your side." He was only 16 years old. He still had a long life ahead of him. The flower town was thriving with each passing day. There were no crises that could not be dealt with, so he could live a relaxed and happy life. The dream of riding a dragon could not be fulfilled in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, August arrived. During this half a month, List had been frantically learning archery. He had successfully mastered triple arrow and had begun to move towards multi-arrow. The mares on the stud farm were basically all pregnant. Black Dragon had lost a lot of weight. Even with its dragon bloodline, it could not withstand the constant labor. Master, the stud farm's alfalfa has reached its limit. At present, the fief has a total of 15 horses, 5 stallions and 10 mares, all grazing on the stud farm. Apart from the 3 old mares that have lost their fertility, the other 7, including Fire Dragon, are already pregnant. One-Eyed Barton said, "There are too many pregnant horses and Black Dragon is about to get hurt. Therefore they need a lot of nutrition. Relying on the stud farm's forage alone is definitely not enough. As long as the horses are raised well, just tell me what you need." List was very concerned about the horses. For the sake of their health and nutrition, they need better concentrated fodder, preferably oats, barley and wheat bran. Peanuts and peas are also very good. This food was not worse than what the commoners ate and even more. At least in terms of quantity, a horse's daily rations were equivalent to that of 3 adults. List did not refuse, directly agreeing to One-Eyed Barton. All right. He also had the confidence to agree because after the Thorns Ridges Road was opened, the Flower Town's caravan could go out to do business unimpeded. At present they mainly sold seafood. The market had just opened and Tulip Castle was the main buyer. They would go once every 3 days and each time, they would purchase about half a gold coin worth of seafood. The Coral City citizens also began to enjoy the delicious seafood. They would also go once every 3 days and each time they would sell it for half a gold coin. In addition, the numerous lesser aristocrats living in the Coral City, as well as the aristocrats and citizens of the North Valley City, which was closest to the Flower Town, added up to 1 gold coin every 3 days. In other words, the Flower Town's caravan could earn 2 gold coins every 3 days. On average, they earned 67 silver coins a day. The cost of seafood and the cost of traveling were practically negligible. This was a net income. Of course, List had yet to see the gold and silver coins. Every time the caravan earned a bit, he would order them to purchase the items needed by the castle: salt, sugar, cloth, seasoning, soap, beer and so on. There was also the pig pancreas, which he had specifically ordered. He even had the caravan purchase 10 piglets, which he gave to the barley settlement serfs to raise in the future. Chicken and duck seedlings were temporarily out of season, so they could not be bought. Foals, calves and lambs were too expensive, so they could not be bought. For the time being, they had to rely on the town's own livestock production. This time the caravan brought back. Carter, who had finished the transaction with old Grandette, returned to the castle and reported to List. Chapter 83. Why was milk tea getting better and better every day? List discovered this problem more than half a month ago. At first, he thought that Moss and Patty's craftsmanship was improving, but it was impossible to feel the improvement of her craftsmanship every day. In fact, Master, Carter said, recently the desserts made with cream have also improved their taste. Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Abbey think that this may be related to the dairy cows on the farm. Big Black and Big Yellow are pregnant with calves. The milk production is constantly improving, and the quality has also improved. Pregnant with calves can also improve the quality of milk? It's probably because the dairy farm has cultivated alfalfa. Compared with the previous 2-leaf clover, alfalfa is more nutritious. I went to the dairy farm to have a look. The 8 cows are in very good condition, especially the 3 calves. They are growing very fast and are about to enter the milk-producing period. Very good. When the calves grow up, there will be no shortage of milk to drink in the castle. List drank the cup of milk tea in 1 gulp. This time the calves in the cow's belly must be fed. Dairy cows were pregnant for about 9 months. In order to maintain milk production after giving birth to calves, they had to start getting pregnant. Therefore, a dairy cow could basically give birth to 1 calf a year. However, due to nutrition, hygiene, disease and other restrictions, the calf could not grow into a dairy cow. It was very likely that it would die midway. In this era, even human children had a great risk of dying prematurely. Even if the aristocrats had strong bodies and doctors to provide treatment, there was no guarantee that the baby would survive. After more than 10 years of breeding on the dairy farm, they had only raised 10 cows. Now that 2 old cows had been eaten by the invisible dragon, there were only 8 left. The pasture was enough to support a few more cows. Milk was an essential food for aristocrats. It was as important as bread and beer. List could not live without milk. He liked drinking milk tea very much. A cup of fresh milk in the morning, a cup of brewed milk for lunch and dinner, and a cup of milk tea before going to bed. the nutrition provided by 4 cups of milk tea made up for his daily consumption of qi cultivation. A knight's qi originated from the body. Without nutrition, how could there be qi? List wiped the milk tea foam from the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief. List suddenly wanted to bring out the pearl milk tea. However, there were no purple potatoes or pumpkins on the coral island, so it was impossible to produce pearls. Therefore, he could only continue to drink milk tea without any additives. When he first came to the castle, the milk tea brewed by Mrs. Morrison was not only a mixture of milk and black tea, but also minced meat, eggs, salt, sugar, salad, and so on, which were later forcibly removed by List. Restoring the original taste of the milk tea. After finishing the cup of milk tea, he said cheerfully, "When the income of the castle increases, I plan to raise a batch of cows and strive to let the servants and squires of the castle drink a cup of fresh milk every day." Carter replied with a smile, "You are always so generous. Only with a little kindness would a servant forever remain loyal." The most important reason was that he wanted to improve the nutrition treatment of the night squad. The next morning, he went to the horse field to practice the multiple arrows, no longer needing Marcus' guidance. Marcus was not far away. He was still training the night squad. The 3 retainer knight, Rome Winebarrel, Grey Sickle, and Odin Insole were also training with the night squad. Only Karl Hammerstein was no longer training with the squad and returned to List. He had successfully cultivated qi and became a trainee knight. His qi was of the water attribute and was very weak. Marcus judged that there was no potential to be unearthed. However, Karl was already very satisfied. These past few days he was so happy that he could not close his mouth. Having qi meant that he was strong, which meant that he was being put in an important position. "Karl, your qi talent has been developed too late, so it will stop here. Once the night squad is trained, it will be very difficult for you to get the opportunity to be my retainer knight. Therefore, I plan to have you work in the town." List was practicing archery while communicating with Karl. Karl was not young anymore. He had already married and had children in Coral City. He said with a solemn expression, "Sir, Karl is willing to follow you. I know your loyalty, but the position of retainer is not suitable for you. With your strength, competing with the youngsters of the night squad will be very disadvantageous." "Sir, Karl also understood that he could not compare to the youngsters of the night squad. This was because there were 2 youngsters, Philip Wool and Xavier Oxdung, who had cultivated qi earlier than him. One had wind attribute qi, while the other had lightning attribute qi. The remaining 10 youngsters had also cultivated qi and could obtain qi at any time. They had more than enough time to advance to become an Earth Knight. He was somewhat flustered. He was not a very smart person. Therefore, for a moment he became confused about his future. List sighed slightly in his heart. He was not an unreasonable and ruthless person. However, the retainer knight was even more so. They needed to protect him, so he could not be the slightest bit careless. "Go to the patrol squad. The patrol squad is made up of ordinary people. The security work needs a trainee knight to coordinate." "Yes, sir." Karl was a little disappointed. The patrol squad could not compare to the prestige of a lord's retainer knight. List could see that Karl was disappointed. He just said lightly, "I will grant you the status of a freedman and appoint you as the Flower Town's defense officer. You will assist Gort in managing the town's security. The patrol squad will be your direct subordinate. This position is very important. Do not let me down, Karl." The expression on his face changed from disappointment to pleasant surprise in an instant. Karl prostrated, "Sir, thank you for the promotion. Karl is willing to serve, sir, for life." In the afternoon, the news of Karl being promoted to a freedman and assuming the post of the Flower Town's defense officer spread throughout the horse farm. Marcus took advantage of a gap in the night squad's training to come over and instruct List in archery practice. They also chatted in passing. "Sir, Karl's story made the night squad train more seriously. Especially Rome, Gray, and Odin, the 3 of them went all out in training. She can change fate. It used to be more like a slogan. However, by giving them a living example, they will realize that it is not a slogan, but a real opportunity." List shook his aching wrist. Even he himself was working hard to become stronger. Marcus said, "Sir, it is you who gave them the opportunity to change their fate." There was nothing wrong with this statement. List expressed his approval. Immediately after, he no longer talked about this topic. Instead, he pulled out 4 arrows and practiced the spiral shadow arrow of multiple arrows, making the 4 arrows assume a spiral trajectory. This was the prerequisite to the ultimate meaning of multiple phantom arrow. The key lay in how to create the illusion effect of the arrows. He held 2 arrows between his index finger and 2 between his middle finger. He drew the bow and pulled the bowstring into a full moon. He aimed at the target not far in front of him and suddenly let go. The 4 arrows were shot at the same time. The magic power attached to the arrows dispersed in the air, driving the 4 arrows to spin. Unfortunately, when the magic power of one of the arrows dispersed, it went in the wrong direction, destroying the entire arrow formation. The airflow was twisted and the other 3 arrows were also affected, causing all 4 arrows to miss the target. Still not enough. Liszt put down the bow and recalled what he had done wrong. There were too many things to learn in archery. He had to control the bowstring's strength, the arrow's direction, the balance of magic power, and he had to take into account how to break the wind resistance as well as the acceleration of gravity. Marcus looked at the trajectory of the arrows, his eyes shining. Chapter 84. This was not a compliment. Liszt also felt that he was talented. Perhaps his body itself had a strong bloodline and excellent genes, far superior to that of ordinary people. Now that he had a soul that transcended the thinking of the times and a grasp of the principles, he could more clearly touch the essence of cultivation. Others might learn archery entirely to hone their experience. There was no knowledge of wind resistance, parabola, inertia, Newton's 3 laws and so on. But he could, through some simple laws of physics, figure out the trajectory of the arrow, and thus master how to shape muscle memory faster so that he could quickly learn archery. What he lacked was only the ability to control the technical details. Summarize failure. Improve technique. Draw the bow and shoot the arrow again. Liszt felt that this kind of simple cultivation, once devoted, was a kind of painful and happy enjoyment. Sir, I am going to take a day off to buy out the serf status of my family and bring them to live in the flower town. Karl smoothly handed over the position of defense officer and finished lecturing the patrol team in the afternoon. In the evening he attended the banquet upstairs in the castle for the first time. He was fidgeting with excitement. Liszt took a bite of bread and responded, "I will allow you to take a day off. Feel free to bring your family to live. Teacher Gort will take care of the work. By the way, do you have enough money to buy out the serf status?" "I have saved up enough. Rome and the others lent me a little. There are only 4 people in my family, my parents, my younger brother and my younger sister. The money on hand is just enough to buy out the serf status. If it is not enough, don't hesitate to ask me for an advance salary or a low-interest loan." Karl was previously a retainer knight. His family was the serf of the Tulip family. Now that he had obtained the status of a freedman, he wanted to free his family from their serf status. As an aristocratic follower, he had enough power to protect his family. Gort raised his glass to Karl and congratulated him. "Blair and Marcus families have devoted themselves to their new lives and are doing very well. Your family will do the same." Karl drank the beer in his glass and said excitedly, "The flower town will get better and better. The glory of the night is watching over this place, watching over Sir." "I agree." Marcus also raised his glass and drank his beer. Blair and Isaiah also raised their cups and drank to their heart's content. Gort, who was a good drinker, finished his cup and waited for the servant to fill it again before he impatiently raised his cup. "In that case, let us toast for the flower town for Sir." He finished his glass of wine. Gort added, "Karl, come back as soon as possible. 3 days from now, there will be a caravan from the North Valley city coming to the flower town. The patrol team will have to supervise the whole process and inform them of the flower town's rules. I will return as soon as possible." "I won't delay my work," Karl hurriedly said. "Dosen, release your magic." Outside the castle, Liszt held Dosen's leash and gave out orders. Dosen immediately opened his mouth and roared in the direction of his finger. In an instant, a rock spike emerged from the ground. When Liszt left with Dosen, the serving men in the castle immediately rushed over and dug the rock spikes out of the soil with a shovel. This rock spike was a solid stone that was condensed from the soil by the magic of the earth attribute. It was very hard, with the hardness of granite. Every day, Dosen could produce a lot of such rock spikes, and then the serving men would collect the rock spikes and use them to pave the road. Liszt demanded that a stone road be built between the castle and the town's main road that could be passed even on rainy days. Otherwise, when it rained, they would not even be able to go out. Now the road had been built to be 40 meters long. "Dosen, go." Liszt continued to train Dosen. He had specially bought back the hares that the hunters had caught. These hares were the training materials for Dosen. The hares ran quickly on the ground and could make all kinds of sudden stops and changes in direction. Even if Dosen was a World of Warcraft and was known as the King of Thorns Ridge, it still had to spend a lot of effort to catch up with the hares. After running for about a kilometer on the horse track, It pressed the hares to the ground and bit its neck. It killed the hares. Dosen directly threw the hare's corpse to the side. It no longer ate raw food. Its mouth had been raised by List and it only ate cooked food. GG. List wore a leather glove on his left hand, and a big furry bird stood on it. It was Blessed Curls, a winged peregrine falcon chick. It could not fly yet, but it had a very loud voice, GG, GG all day long. It also had a big appetite and could eat several fish in one meal. Hearing Blessed Curls cry, Dosen immediately turned around and rushed to List's side, drooling at Blessed Curls. Must want to eat a bird and have a taste. GG. GG. Blessed Curls flapped its wings, somewhat eager to try flying. Once the layer of fluff fell off and was replaced with flight feathers, it would probably be time to try flying. List had a headache. Birds yearned for the sky and it was very difficult to bind them to the ground. However, it did not have the behavior of recognizing an owner. On Coral Island there was no one who could domesticate birds. Don't cry or I'll braise you. List handed Blessed Curls to Thomas. Thomas hurriedly caught Blessed Curls with his gloved hand, for fear that it would fall and be eaten by Dosen. This Blessed Curls was now about the size and weight of a sausage. Thomas had some difficulty holding it with one hand. List understood his difficulty. Take it back to the nest. Yes, master. When Thomas sent Blessed Curls away and returned, List had already trained Dosen to the point of gasping for breath. Take Dosen back and tie him up. I'm going to start practicing archery. Yes, master. Upon seeing this, two robust youngsters next to him hurriedly stepped forward and handed the bow and arrows to List. Sir, your bow and arrows. They were Philip Wool and Xavier Oxdung, members of the night squad who had already cultivated chi. They no longer needed to train with the night squad every day and began to serve as a retainer knight. List received the bow and arrows. List quickly entered a state of mind and practiced multiple arrows. Now he only had Spiral Shadow Arrow to learn. He had already successfully learned the other 4 moves, but he was not very proficient. Today I will try to master Spiral Shadow Arrow, and tomorrow I will start practicing multiple Phantom Arrow. From morning to afternoon. Sweat dripped over and over again. Finally, when the sun was setting, he successfully cast Spiral Shadow Arrow. 4 arrows spiraled and shot, instantly turning into numerous phantoms before finally hitting the target. Phew. List heaved a sigh of relief. He rubbed his wrist. Today's archery practice was over. In another week, I should be able to master multiple Phantom Arrow. With this thought in mind, he summoned the smoke mission and habitually swept it with a glance. However, with a glance, he found that the serpentines had changed. Mission completed. Reward, Black Pearl of the Deep Sea. Mission, a caravan is about to arrive at the Flower Town. This is the first time a caravan has come to trade since the Lord took office. Please ensure that the transaction amount reaches 3 gold coins or above in order to attract the caravan to come again. Reward, a bottle that drifts with the current. List was surprised. When did I actually complete the mission? I clearly haven't learned the ultimate meaning of multiple Phantom Arrow. Suddenly he remembered. When he practiced multiple arrows, one of Marcus's multiple Phantom Arrow had missed the target. Does this mean that Marcus hasn't actually grasped the ultimate meaning? He shot 2 sets of arrows and missed the target, so it can't be considered as having grasped it? Therefore, I only need to learn double arrow, triple arrow, and multiple arrow to complete the mission? There was no doubt that this was the case. Chapter 87. The giant clam's shell was very difficult to pry open. Without tools, the fishermen were helpless. List didn't force it. In any case, it was fine as long as the Black Pearl couldn't run away. After the large cuttlefish was dismembered and the rotten corpse was thrown into the sea, List ordered people to carry the giant clam back to the castle and slowly study it. The giant clam had a strange shape. Along the way, it attracted the attention of many townspeople. When they arrived at the castle, all the servants also ran out to watch. No one had ever seen such a strange thing. Teacher Marcus, how do you think we should open it? Marcus pondered for a moment and said, It is very strong. The 2 pieces of shell are firmly fixed, but its shell is irregular. There are many gaps and we can use a stick to pry it open. Ordinary wooden sticks won't do. It would be best to use a thick iron stick. However, there shouldn't be such an iron stick. Iron tools were very precious. No one would use iron or to forge a thick iron stick specially used to pry open the giant clam's shell. Perhaps we can use fire. Carter suggested. The shell is too thick. It would be difficult for fire to harm it. List rejected it. There were still black pearls inside. If it were to be cooked. Use hooks. 2 hooks each hook a piece of shell. Then use the horses to pull the shell open. Marcus finally thought of a stupid method. However, the result was good. When the 2 horses each pulled a rope and almost broke the rope, the giant clam shell was finally pulled open. The giant clam was like a blooming flower. It didn't open too much, but the bands supporting the shell could already be found, which were the adductor muscles. Marcus clenched his 2-handed sword. His chi gushed out and directly cut off one of the bands. Clatter. The horse that pulled the giant clam shell with all its might directly split it into 2 halves, and it could no longer be closed. List's gaze was already fixed on the group of protrusions on the giant clam's inner wall. The protrusions were round and hidden inside were the pearls. Cut it open carefully. There are pearls inside. Don't scratch the pearls. Yes, sir. Marcus used the knife personally and carefully cut open the protruding membrane. When the largest protruding membrane was cut open, a shiny black pearl was revealed. It was the size of a wash basin. There are more on the side. Cut them all open and take them out. List was very excited. He hadn't figured out what these black pearls could do, but it was still incredible to find such a large black pearl. If this was placed in his hometown, it would definitely fetch a sky-high price. When Marcus finished cutting, he took out a total of 16 black pearls of different sizes. The biggest one was the size of a wash basin. Next were 2 basketball-sized pearls, followed by 3 bowl-sized pearls, followed by a large pile of apples, oranges, and ping-pong balls. After cleaning it, List held the largest black pearl in his hands and suddenly felt that there seemed to be traces of magic power flowing on the pearl. He quickly cast magic eyes, and then saw a whirlpool-like deep magic power inside the black pearl. The color was light blue, which was the color of water magic. It actually has magic power? He had previously used magic eyes to observe the giant clam and didn't find the slightest trace of magic power. Who would have thought that the black pearls actually had magic power? Sir, these black pearls seem to have magic power? Marcus also found the abnormality, but he didn't have magic eyes and didn't dare to make a judgment. It does indeed have magic power. List swayed the black pearls, thinking of the night novels he had read. One of the night novels seemed to have recorded that the song of the siren could calm the storm of the sea. There was a great knight who captured the siren and made it into a piece of magic equipment. This piece of equipment could allow the ship to sail steadily even in the midst of a storm. No one knew what the siren was. Some people swore that they had heard the song of the siren. Costo had just said that he had heard the song of the siren, but there was no record of what the siren was. Most people thought that the siren was just a story made up by sailors. This story had nothing to do with the black pearls. What made List think of it was the equipment made by the siren to protect the ship against the storm. Can these black pearls also be made into magic equipment to resist the storm? After all, it is a magic item with the water attribute, and the magic power is also very rich, almost comparable to the gems produced by dragons. I don't know if it would work to suppress the storm at sea, but it should be possible to make magic equipment. Without a mage, it was impossible to study the black pearls. List felt that they could also be used for other purposes, for example, as an air conditioner. Teacher Marcus, Mr. Carter, everyone, do you feel that the air is much cooler? Marcus carefully felt it. I don't feel cool, but the moisture in the air seems to have increased. It should be that the black pearls condensed the surrounding water vapor. In any case, they are good things. If you want to sell them, how many gold coins do you think they can be sold for? I have seen fist-sized white pearls. I heard from others that they are worth at least 5 gold coins. I guess that black pearls of the same size should be sold for 10 gold coins? As for the largest black pearl, sir, I can't estimate its value. It is a brand new pearl. It has a very rich magic power, definitely more valuable than white pearls, but the castle is not short of money for the time being. Its price should be considered again. List was not very satisfied with Marcus' valuation. He felt that even if the black pearl was twice the price of white pearls, it was still underestimated. Its value was probably far greater than imagined. So he said to Carter, Mr. Carter, move them to my study. He kept a ping-pong ball-sized black pearl in his hand, carefully playing with it. Yes, master. After a moment, Carter came back and asked, Master, what about the giant clam? Can its meat be eaten? I think it can. Well, let Dosen have a taste first. In case it is poisonous, just throw it away. What about the 2 shells? Clean the inside of the shell. I want to see if it has turned into jade. Jade giant clams in List's hometown were precious jewels, one of the 7 treasures of Buddhism. In the West, giant clams, pearls, corals, and amber stood side by side, known as the 4 great organic jewels. Jade giant clams were the whitest substance in the world, it was formed by the inside of the giant clam that had turned into jade. Such a big giant clam, there should be a part of it that has turned into jade. However, Liszt soon realized that he was wrong. Although the giant clam was huge, there was no sign of the inside of it turning into jade. At this time he remembered that it was impossible for a living giant clam to turn into jade. It took time for it to turn into jade, just like the gestation of jade, it needed thousands of years of precipitation and carving before it could be produced. Jade giant clams were dead giant clams buried in the sand, and after thousands of years they gradually turned into jade. Without jade it could not be made into jewels. Liszt had a wild idea. "Mr. Carter, what do you think would happen if it was made into a bed?" Chapter 88. The giant clam shell was very large, more than 2 meters long and nearly 2 meters wide. Liszt's height had been growing and he was now almost 1.85 meters tall, so he could still sleep in the giant clam's shell. Of course, this proposal was just a casual remark. The giant clam's shell was too strange. With its large wavy shape, it was not suitable to be made into a bed. He had people place the giant clam's shell at the castle's gate, using it as a huge sculpture. It had to be said that the giant clam's shell, with its internal organs removed and cleaned, looked very beautiful. After dealing with the giant clam's matter, Liszt returned to the study and began to study the black pearls. Carter had moved the black pearls to the study, but now, except for the small black pearl in Liszt's hand, no other black pearls could be seen, because they had been stuffed into the space gem on his chest by Liszt. He chose to keep valuable items close to his body. So when Carter brought a glass of juice, he said in surprise, "Master, I clearly put the black pearls on this shelf, how come they are gone?" "I hid them, don't be surprised." "Very well." Carter didn't ask carefully where Liszt hid the black pearls. As a steward, he didn't need to know. All he needed to do was to serve the master and manage the castle's daily affairs. Drinking the juice. After half a day of fumbling, Liszt gradually had a basic understanding of the black pearls. It is very rich in magic, not much worse than the gems produced by dragons. But compared to the continuous supply of magic from gems, the black pearl's magic seems to need to be replenished. "I don't have water magic, so I can't replenish it." The ping-pong ball-sized black pearl in his hand was constantly emitting magic fluctuations. This kind of fluctuation was completely different from the dragon gem. He used words that he could understand to distinguish the two. The dragon gem is more like a stable magnetic field formed by magic, it won't dissipate. The black pearl is more like a radioactive object, constantly emitting magic. After a long time you can feel the loss of magic. So, in essence, the black pearl was a lot lower than the dragon gem. A dragon gem could easily be sold for 700 to 800 gold coins. Just like what Marcus said, a black pearl could probably be sold for around 10 gold coins. However, who knows what kind of sky-high price a basin-sized black pearl can fetch. I believe that those great nobles who are crazy about treasures and collecting antiques will be willing to buy them with dragon coins. A dragon coin was worth 10,000 gold coins. It was very difficult for great nobles who weren't especially rich to use dragon coins. Thinking so, he was unperturbed. I always feel that the reward for the smoke mission this time is the most substantial. The reward content isn't too generous, but it's no different from giving money for free. It's real. Up until now he had completed a total of 18 quests. He had not figured out the pattern of the quests, nor had he grasped the pattern of the rewards. However, most of the mission rewards were very valuable. If one had to measure them, the World of Warcraft rewards like Dosen and Blessed Curls were worth around 100 gold coins. The productivity rewards like Sprite Worms were worth around 1 or 2,000 gold coins. Sprite Worms were indeed magical and rare, but they only had a lifespan of 10 years, which was a huge constraint. Things like the Black Tulip, Flame Mushroom, and Dragon Stallion were worth an acceptable price of 1 dragon coin. Chi secret skills like Magic Eyes were worth 3,000 gold coins. Things like Corngrass, Smokegrass, Super Small Saltpeter Mine, and 50 People, although their value was a bit hard to calculate, they were still very valuable. As for the information about the Invisible Dragon, that was another matter. The most valuable thing was the Invisible Dragon Gem, a gem with its own space, which was a priceless treasure. However, these rewards would either require a long period of development before they could fully display their value, or they wouldn't be able to display their value due to various factors, or they would simply get into trouble because of their wealth. For example, the space gem wouldn't be exposed at all, as it would attract disaster. However, the current black pearls were different. Their value was very high. The 16 black pearls of various sizes could be sold for at least 10,000 gold coins. The key was that they could be sold separately. After all, these things were not a set, they were all individual items. Should I sell them or sell them or sell them? List pondered for a moment and decided to take out a bowl-sized black pearl to test the market. Yesterday, Carter told him that August 19th was Levis's birthday and asked what gift he wanted. When the time came, he would go to Tulip Castle to participate in the other party's birthday party. As a gift, just some high-grade seafood will do. I can also ask him if he has any plans to buy black pearls. The Tulip family has water-attributed chi, so they should have a need for black pearls. I can ask a wizard to help me forge a magic equipment. When the time comes, he can also answer my doubts about how black pearls can be used. No one was better at studying magic items than wizards. It was hard to say whether there were wizards on the Coral Island, but the Tulip family could definitely contact a wizard. If the price was right, List was ready to sell a few black pearls first, raise a sum of gold coins, and then give them to Levis to continue to help him buy serfs. He also had to buy some pig iron and wrought iron to be handed over to the blacksmith shop to forge farm tools. He was very dissatisfied with the inefficiency of the town's serfs in farming. There was no way to get cattle for the time being, and the study of plows would take time. Therefore, he could only forge more shovels and hoes so that all serfs could plow the fields more efficiently. Thus, some serfs would be liberated from the farmland and put into other professions. If I sell them for a high price, I can buy some calves, foals, lambs, and concentrate fodder for pregnant horses. By the way, I can repair the castle. It is best to build a fire bed. It is going to be winter soon. In this era of no heating, I can only enjoy it by burning a fire bed. Being far-sighted was probably how List was described. Not long after the beginning of summer, he was already thinking about winter's life. The North Valley City's caravan arrived at the flower town before 8 o'clock in the morning. After more than 8 months, the caravan entered the flower town again. In the past, the caravan would follow the tax night and come once a season, except for winter. In other words, 3 times a year. Every time the caravan came, the team would be as lively as a New Year's Day. This time was no exception. The mighty caravan quickly attracted all the residents of the town. Basically, they put down their work and came to watch. List, who had finished his morning exercise and no longer touched the bow and arrow, returned to the castle to take a bath. Standing in front of the window, he could see the bustling crowd of the town. In particular, the clowns who had set up the stage and began to perform burlesque attracted the attention of the vast majority of the town's residents. The laughter and cheers could even be heard in the castle. "Maggie, go and call Mr. Carter," he said to the maid Maggie, who was cleaning. "Yes, master." Soon Carter rushed over. "Master, you were looking for me? The town is very lively today. Tell everyone in the castle that if they want to rest today, they can go directly to the castle to rest. Go to the town to see the burlesque, or buy some snacks and relax. You are really a generous aristocrat. I will tell the servants the truth. Including you, Mr. Carter." Chapter 89. Mrs. Abby, Little Lily and I are going to the town to see the burlesque. Would you like to go with us? Irene moved the large piece of giant clam meat from the basket outside the castle to dry. Dosen had eaten a large piece of giant clam meat yesterday. Not only was he fine, he was also full of vigor. Therefore, giant clam meat could be eaten. Oh heavens! Why is the master so generous to let you have a holiday? Mrs. Abby busily arranged the various seasonings on the stove. If you like being a maid, then you should obediently stay in the kitchen. There are a lot of things to do every day. Mr. Carter said that the master only needs a fried steak for lunch, while we servants can eat beans and bread. We don't need to do much work. Little Lily was also moving the giant clam meat. A giant clam weighed more than 500 jin. After removing the 300 jin shell, there was still more than 200 jin of meat. Mr. Carter is the same as the master, always indulging you young servants who don't work hard. This is not the benevolence of a qualified butler. When I was young, I was busy all day in the kitchen, never idle for even a moment. That is the working attitude a kitchen maid should have. Cough, cough. Carter's cough came from the door. At some point, he had already arrived. Although I can understand Mrs. Abby's serious attitude towards work, you shouldn't always be so tense. Go stroll around the town with the young people. It's rare for a caravan to come. Sorry, Mr. Carter, I didn't mean to offend you. Mrs. Abby felt a little embarrassed. She had just been caught speaking ill of him behind his back. It doesn't matter. In fact, you said I'm benevolent, so I take it as a compliment. Go with Irene and Little Lily to see the town's burlesque. Those clowns will make me laugh when I think of them. That won't do, I have to make lunch for the master. Then hurry back before 11 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock now, we can still stroll around for 2 hours. Not waiting for Mrs. Abby to refuse, Carter interrupted her. Just consider it a task I gave you and have fun for 2 hours. Ah, Mr. Carter, you are good. Irene happily pulled Abby's arm. Let's go, Mrs. Abby, I can't wait to see the clown. Little Lily pulled Abby's other arm. Yes, let's go. Mrs. Abby had no choice but to half push them out. I don't want to go shopping, but I'd better keep an eye on you two in case you go crazy and forget to come back to work. Also, wait a minute, I'm going to change my clothes. I can't go out dressed like this, it would lose the castle's dignity. Carter smiled as he looked at the two children and the big one making a ruckus. Compared to working in the Count's other castle, the work in this small town's castle was a bit busier, but life was more lively. The youthful vigor of youth made him feel an inexplicable motivation in his body, as if he was younger than last year. He heard footsteps. He turned around and saw that it was Mrs. Morrison. Maggie and the others have already gone shopping in town? Yes, Tom and Thomas went with them. Mr. Carter, are you not going with them? Mrs. Abby, Irene, and little Lily are changing their clothes. They are going to the town to see a burlesque. I think you should go with them. As for the castle, I will stay here to serve the master. Even Thomas has left. If the master wants to drink water, there will always be a manservant to serve him. Then I will also stay here. If there is anything, you can call me. Are you sure you don't want to join in the fun? I'm already old, I can't wait to avoid the fun, how could I want to join in? Don't say that, Mrs. Morrison. I feel that the more I live, the younger I am. Carter straightened his chest, making himself look more spirited. Yes, young Carter. Annie, have you sold more than half of the tomatoes? John Shoulderpole walked to his stall. The stall was located on the southwest side of the town, where a large flat area had been cleared. Caravans that came to the town were arranged to do business here. There were also a few wooden toilets outside. The patrol team and the town clerk shouted over and over again, Sir Lord has decreed that no one is allowed to urinate or defecate anywhere. Violators will be fined and whipped. If you want to go to the toilet, follow the arrow and go to the toilet outside. The one with the circle below and the arrow pointing up, male sign, is the men's toilet sign. The one with the circle above and the cross below, female sign, is the women's toilet sign. Don't get it wrong. John was already used to this instruction. It had been a long time since he had defecated on the street. His family had prepared a manure bucket and stored the excrement and urine. After the manure was removed, it would be directly used to compost the tomato fields. This was a farming magic taught by the Sir Lord. The farmers who used this magic to fertilize the fields could have a harvest of 20 to 30% more than before. Previously, the town's officials organized the purchase of manure. But now they could no longer be collected. Every household kept the manure and planted it in their own fields. After the harvest, the kind and generous Sir Lord only collected taxes in proportion, unlike the previous tax knight who could not wait to collect all of the serf's harvest. Since the arrival of the Sir Lord, John felt that not only himself, but also the surrounding neighbors had undergone earth-shaking changes. Of course he was the luckiest one. Because the Sir Lord rewarded him with a nalda because the tomatoes he had taken care of had bred a tomato worm. John, aren't you going to work with the house-building team today? Annie asked her husband curiously. There was not much farm work now. Her husband was working with the house-building team for a copper a day. The house-building team is on holiday. No one wants to work today, so they all came here, to the commercial district. John pointed to a place not far away. Look, that's Wenger. He's also shopping with his son. Well, then let's go watch the skits. I've sold all the tomatoes, so I want to go watch the skits. I haven't seen one for a long time. John did not leave. Instead, he said, by the way, Annie, when I came over there, I saw someone selling kittens. I want to buy one. Now that we have food in our house, the number of rats has begun to increase. These dirty thieves, they always steal our food. Really? Is there anyone selling kittens? Then wait here for me. After I sell all the tomatoes, we'll go buy kittens together. We must choose a kitten that can catch rats the best. After hesitating for a moment, John added, actually, I also want to buy a foal. I want little Jack to learn how to ride from an early age, so that he can become a retainer knight of Sir Lord earlier. Oh my God, John, do you know how much a foal costs? 50 silver coins, but Annie, that is a foal. John explained hopefully, if we miss this opportunity, I don't know when we will get a horse again. I want to grow tomatoes for Sir Lord for a lifetime, but little Jack doesn't like it. He wants to become a retainer knight. But John, you need to understand we can afford 50 silver coins, but foals need to eat a lot every day. A horse needs to eat at least several people's food. Can we afford it? I can. John said with a firm look in his eyes. The tomato field at home is the best, it can always bring us a stable income. I can also work. I asked the house building team's manager, he is Sir Isaiah's assistant. He told me that there will be more and more work in the town in the future. Sir Lord is ambitious and wants to make the town look new. As long as I can continue to work, we can afford to raise foals. Are you serious, John? Of course, believe me, Annie. Annie looked at her husband's firm eyes and finally couldn't bear to refuse. All right, but you have to promise me that we won't be dragged down by foals, right? Chapter 90. List didn't want to disturb the lively atmosphere of the town, but in the end he couldn't hold back and went to the commercial district to watch a farce. It was a clown throwing balls, blowing fire, or somersaulting on the stage. In his opinion, this was nothing new, but the townspeople were cheerfully clapping their hands. It made List want to go up and show them the three immortals' return to cave trick, so that these people from the other world could feel the charm of China's ancient culture and tradition. Of course, he could only think about it. Aristocrats could not do anything that would be beneath their status. Besides, in a world where wizards existed, magic didn't seem to be a magical performance. After watching the show, he left the commercial district and went to the town's administrative office, lest the townspeople feel uncomfortable. In front of the Lord, they couldn't relax and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Although he had left, he was still paying attention to the caravan. He was listening to Isaiah's report on the prices of the goods brought by the caravan, especially those related to production and daily necessities. A foal costs at least 50 silver coins. This price is too high, he asked with a frown. One had to know that when he and Leavish traded slaves, a serf was only worth 20 silver coins. It is indeed very expensive, Sir Baron. The Coral Island is far from the continent and has no suitable grazing area. The breeding of horses has always been limited, so the price of horses has always been high. Even the horses of the Blue Dragon Island are so expensive. On the continent, a foal might only cost a few silver coins. The archipelago countries were all islands, so they were naturally not suitable for grazing and raising horses. List understood this, but he didn't want to accept it for a while. He gave old Grandet 3 gold coins, thinking that he could buy a lot of goods. But now it seemed that he could spend it all on 6 foals. How many livestock cubs did the caravan bring? He asked, feeling a little disappointed. He originally wanted to eat all the livestock cubs brought by the caravan, but now it seemed that it was an extravagant hope. Apart from him, perhaps ordinary residents didn't have the financial resources to buy them. 5 foals, 2 calves, 3 lambs, 8 piglets, 6 puppies, 5 kittens and 10 rabbits. I gave old Grandet 3 gold coins, but it doesn't seem to help. It's not enough to buy a few livestock. At this moment he desperately wanted to sell the black pearls and exchange them for money to buy livestock. Meat was the most nutritious food. He hoped to eat meat every day, seafood aside. If the territory didn't rear livestock, how could he, as the Lord, find meat every day? 3 gold coins can't buy a lot of livestock, but it can buy a lot of other goods. The caravan has brought a lot of local specialties. But I told old Grandet to give priority to the horses. 5 foals cost 2 gold coins and 50 silver coins. The castle's funds have all been used up. List remembered that he still had 2 gold coins. Perhaps he should take them out too. He would spend them today and save a few livestock. Isaiah smiled and said, Lord Baron, I looked at the transaction records. Old Grandet only bought 2 foals. The other 3 were bought by someone else. Oh, John Shoulderpole bought one. You must still remember it. It turned out to be the farmer who grew tomatoes. I rewarded him with a gold coin. Obviously he can afford it. What about the other 2? The Blair family bought one. Marcus also bought one. Gort lent him the money. List's mood turned from gloomy to sunny. He bought all the horses. Although they weren't owned by the castle, but as long as they stayed in the flower town, he could conscript them at will. But soon he laughed in spite of himself. He felt that his vision was too shallow. He only focused on the livestock brought by the caravan. After he sold the black pearls for money, he could go to other cities to purchase livestock. This was his original plan. As long as he had gold coins, he would be able to buy what he wanted. Isaiah, what do you think the caravan's turnover will be today? I guess it will be 6 gold coins. With a turnover of 6 gold coins, I believe that many of the caravan's peddlers are already preparing for their next visit. Of course, peddlers are like flies. As long as there is money to be made, there will always be their shadow. Isaiah spoke with natural contempt. This was the unparalleled sense of superiority of the aristocratic class over the commoners. At the same time, it was accompanied by the desire to attack the rising momentum of the commoners. The aristocracy would not allow any class to shake its dominance. Sometimes, merchants would make the aristocracy feel that they were being provoked. Some of them even had more wealth than the aristocracy. Money could move the gods. There were many cases of aristocrats who were on the verge of bankruptcy marrying their daughters to merchants, or marrying a merchant's daughter to become an aristocratic madam. Lis smiled. His idea of the merchant class was the same as that of the aristocracy, to both support and attack them. Back to the castle. It was lunchtime. Although he had instructed the kitchen to only order a steak, there was no need for it to be too sumptuous. But when it came time to eat, it was still the same as usual. There was meat, vegetables, shiitake mushrooms, seafood, milk, and white bread. Mrs. Abby didn't go shopping? Master, Mrs. Abby went out, but half an hour later, she returned to the kitchen. Maybe she's not used to the lively scene in the town, or maybe she can't let go of the kitchen work. She's too dedicated, always busy. You should tell her that I don't consider raising her salary for the time being. So, she doesn't have to keep herself busy. She has to have her own life. Although he had adapted to the aristocratic identity, he still liked it. Lis still retained the goodness of modern people. He hoped that even servants could have their own lives, rather than dedicating themselves to the Lord. Life should not only be work, 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 but also have one's own joys and sorrows, laughter, and a family. Carter served Lis. For the cook, the kitchen is life. For the servants, the castle is life. Master, you don't have to think about us all the time. The sun climbs from east to west every day, and the servants are busy from morning to night every day. Life is about everyone doing their part. These words were very philosophical. Lis was speechless. His ideas were still estranged from this era. He had the pursuit of freedom in his bones, but the concept of class had been branded in the depths of the hearts of everyone in the other world. If a servant didn't work, could he still be called a servant? If an aristocrat didn't enjoy life, could he still be called an aristocrat? Therefore, he had no intention of refuting or correcting Carter's words. On the contrary, his conscience might be a little uncomfortable, but he was quite happy in his heart. If everyone thought like this, the aristocratic master's life would be more stable and comfortable. They were all good people. Lis had just finished his lunch and was ready to tease Dosen and Blessed Curls before taking a nap. Chapter 91. The metal bottle was shaped a bit like a bottle used to pack high-end liquor. It was very unique. Its color was golden yellow, close to the color of gold coins but a bit more brown. There were complex engraved patterns on it, and some patterns were wrapped in them. They looked like abstract pictures of the sun and trees, as well as bows and arrows and some kind of zither, as well as a bear and a flying eagle. Overall, this metal bottle was like a precious art that aristocrats liked to collect the most. Clang, clang, clang. He tapped the metal bottle with his finger, making a strange sound. It was not a sound that metal should make, it was a bit similar to the sound of plastic. However, it was obvious that this brownish-yellow bottle was definitely a metal product. It had the tactile feel of metal. Teacher Gort, what kind of metal do you think this is? Lis shook the bottle. It should be empty, there was no movement inside. Gort spread his hands. Gold, silver, copper, iron. This is not any metal I have ever seen. Please forgive me for not knowing what it is. It doesn't have a mouth? It looks like a hole. I have carefully checked where the mouth of the bottle should be. There is no gap. I can't twist it. Lis tried it with his hand and really couldn't twist it. There was no cap on the mouth of the bottle, it was a solid hole. What do you think is inside? A bottle of wine? Sweet dreams don't always come true. Teacher Gort, I don't think there is any liquid inside. Gort laughed. Haha, you can always fantasize about it before it is opened. Lis handed the bottle to Carter and had Carter put it back in his study. Keep it first. When I have time, I will slowly figure out how to open it. Yes, master. After Carter left, Lis motioned for Gort to find a place to sit. He asked, how is the caravan trade going? Everything is going smoothly. Since you started to develop the flower town and provided a large number of paid jobs, the fief's residents gradually have extra money and can pick some small goods from the caravan stalls. Almost half of the merchants' goods have been sold. Even the burlesque stage has been thrown a few copper coins. Comedy shows were usually hired by caravans who pooled their money together. They were open to the public for free to attract customers. Only when the audience was happy would they throw some coins on the stage as a reward for these clowns. The flower town was poor. Perhaps the residents would laugh until their stomachs hurt, reluctant to throw out a copper coin. He didn't expect that someone would actually tip the clowns. Who are the people who threw the copper coins? I only saw one person throw a coin, your kitchen maid, Irene Four Fingers. Irene Four Fingers? List didn't have much contact with the kitchen maid. He didn't even see her once in a day. The status of kitchen maids was very low. They weren't allowed to go upstairs, appear in the hall on the first floor, and hang around in front of the nobles. He only knew from Butler Carter that Irene was a straightforward and candid little girl. Young people are always very generous, he commented. Gort wanted to say that he was also a young man, only 16 years old, not as old as the little girl. But he didn't say it out loud. The current List had the maturity and steadiness of a middle-aged man. When dealing with people, it was almost impossible to ignore his slightly immature face. Perhaps this is the talent brought about by aristocratic blood. Gort often thought so. At first, he followed List to the flower town just to get a free meal and drink as an advisor. At his age, he no longer expected to revitalize the family business and restore the glory of the aristocracy. Unexpectedly, not only did List change the flower town, but he also changed his idea of idling around. Gort knew very well that Freya's pregnancy was just a prelude. In the final analysis, it was List's will that determined the behavior of the people around him. Otherwise, there was no need to pay so much attention to an illegitimate child. Which aristocrat did not have a few illegitimate children outside? For the sake of family harmony, many aristocratic illegitimate children could only be serfs for life. Teacher Gort. Seeing that Gort was a little distracted, List couldn't help but remind him. Gort immediately sat up straight. Go ahead. As an official, you have to supervise every transaction of the caravan. Profiteers are not allowed to harm civilians. At the same time, patrols and clerks are not allowed to take things from the caravan. Please rest assured, I will emphasize this point every day. The publicity work must be done well. Publicize that the flower town welcomes outsiders to settle down and that taxes are the most favorable. Also, tell the people of the caravan how the flower town will develop next. Show them the plans for the commercial district, workshop district and residential district, so that they can feel the bright future of the flower town. As you wish. After sending off Gort, List did not immediately go for a lunch break. He went straight to the study and played with the metal bottle on the desk. He was very interested in this floating bottle. He concentrated for a moment and called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, sea drift bottle. Mission, the bottle that cannot be opened, the text that cannot be understood. This is due to the difference in knowledge, but it does not mean that it cannot be solved. The blind old leathersmith of the leathersmith's shop feels that his health is getting worse. Give him a son and he might be willing to exchange a book for it. Mission reward, unknown book. As expected, the metal bottle picked up by the fisherman was the reward for the smoke mission. The caravan's mission of 3 gold coins was completed early on. But when he saw the new mission, List didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The bottle that cannot be opened, does it mean that I cannot open the drift bottle? The text that cannot be understood, does it mean that there is a note inside, maybe in a foreign language? However, what the hell is the content of the mission? Give the old leathersmith a son? If the other party's wife was in her prime, graceful, and charming, List would not mind giving the other party a son and a hat. However, he had carefully read the information of the town's craftsmen during the census. He had an impression of the old leathersmith. He was a widower with no relatives or friends. He had come to the flower town 10 years ago by begging, settled down in the flower town, and picked up his skills as a leathersmith. How could he give such a person a son? Give him a son. Maybe my thinking is a bit off track. I should first have someone investigate the old leathersmith. He shook the bell and called Carter. Master. Mr. Carter, have someone send a letter to Teacher Gort and have him investigate the old leathersmith in the town. The information must be detailed. If the other party has any difficulties, you can help him along the way. Carter said, Master, maybe you should ask Jesse. He is very familiar with the old leathersmith. Jesse? Jesse Ricewater used to be the castle's serving man assistant. He had been promoted to serving man and was mainly responsible for running errands for the castle. After a while, Jesse, who was playing in the town, was called back. Master, you were looking for me? Even though he had become a serving man, he was still a bit ill at ease when facing List, not knowing where to put his hands. List asked directly, You are very familiar with the old leathersmith? Tell me about the old leathersmith. You mean Uncle Phil? I got to know Uncle Phil when I went to the leathersmith's shop to mend leather shoes. Uncle Phil is blind, so it is very inconvenient for him to work. Now that his health is getting worse, I often visit him and help him with some things. Chapter 92. Does Uncle Phil want a son? Jesse was taken aback at first, but then he nodded. It seems so. I have heard him complain that he has no son and that there is no one to take care of him when he is sick. List looked at Jesse. Suddenly he asked, Jesse, if I remember correctly, you seem to be an orphan? Yes, master. I grew up in the Coral City's orphanage. Thank you for the generosity of the Tulip family for letting us orphans live, said Jesse piously. Orphanages were institutions for aristocrats to take in orphans. Accidents were always happening to commoners, leaving a few children unattended. In order to show their benevolence, some wealthy aristocrats would set up orphanages in their families' fiefs and take in orphans. After they grew up, they would directly work for the castle. Jesse was such an orphan. Is the old leathersmith in the leathersmith shop? Yes, master. I had wanted to invite Uncle Phil to go shopping with me, but he was unwilling. In that case, Jesse, come with me to see the old leathersmith. I have something to discuss with him. All right, I will prepare a horse for you, master. On the horse field outside the castle, there was a crudely constructed lounge. Philip and Xavier had been standing guard here. As retainer knight, they did not enjoy the benefits of a holiday. Seeing List mount Fiery Dragon, they each mounted a horse and followed List. Together they went to the leathersmith shop. In every small town there were leathersmith shops. Leathersmiths were craftsmen who made leather, sewed fur coats, and mended leather shoes. Subdivided, there were leathersmiths, saddlers, drummers, leathersmiths, shoemakers, and so on. Generally speaking, shoemakers were the majority. The Flower Town's old leathersmith, Phil, was a shoemaker. In big cities, shoemakers were often wealthy freedmen, as a pair of leather shoes cost a lot of money. But in small towns, shoemakers were treated poorly. Few people could afford to wear leather shoes. Therefore, the leathersmith shop could only make ends meet. Most serfs and freedmen wore wooden and straw sandals. Of course, even more people did not wear shoes. Is that Jesse? The old leathersmith's somewhat hoarse voice came from the table. He was currently repairing a pair of leather shoes. Even though he was blind, his hands were still nimble. Jesse hurriedly said, Uncle Phil, Sir Lord is here. Sir Lord is looking for you. Ah, Sir Lord, old Phil sends his regards to Sir Lord. The old leathersmith hurriedly stood up from his chair and bowed in greeting. Just like any other commoner who saw their lord, he was so nervous that his hands trembled. List sized up the narrow and dark leathersmith shop. He could see that the shop had been in disrepair for many years. The sun in the sky could be seen from the roof. Like the old leathersmith, he showed signs of old age and decay. Old Phil, don't be nervous. I'm just here to chat with you. The old leathersmith's turbid eyes did not reveal any change in his emotions. However, List sensed that the other party's hands had quickly stopped trembling. This was not a sign that the nervousness had subsided. It looked more like the performance had stopped. Perhaps the nervousness from before was just an act. This was easy to understand. After all, aristocrats liked to see commoners trembling in front of them. The old man had long since learned to deal with life. Sir Lord, it is old Phil's honor to chat with the noble you. You begged 10 years ago and settled in the Flower Town. Then where are you originally from? I was born on the Dodo Island, Sir Lord. Dodo Island? It is a deserted island without a lord to govern it. It is further north of the Coral Island. There's a kind of dodo bird living on the island. It can't fly and it sounds like dodo. There's also a particularly tall tree with a scary name. It's called Human Skull Tree and its fruit is called Human Skull Fruit. Skull Tree? Yes, Sir Lord. The fruit is white. From a distance it looks like a human skull. However, it tastes delicious. The island's natives eat skull fruit to alleviate their hunger. Dodos also eat skull fruit. However, dodo bird meat is particularly unpalatable. Life on the island is very difficult. The dodo bird, that sounds like a dodo. It reminded List of the extinct dodo bird on Earth. He didn't know if the dodos here were the same species as the ones on Earth. So, how did you come to the Coral Island from the dodo bird? Since you were born on the Dodo Island, you should be a native. Then, where do the natives of the Dodo Island come from? List asked. There were still many undeveloped deserted islands in the periphery of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The Dodo Island should be one of them. I am a native of the Dodo Island. I don't know where we came from. As far as I can remember, we all lived on the Dodo Island. Later on, the Dodo volcano erupted and a large number of skull trees were destroyed. Without food we had to cut down trees to make canoes and drift along the sea. At that time, I drifted to the hot spring island and became a leathersmith's apprentice. Subsequently, the hot spring island suffered from the chaos of war and he was sold as a slave to the coral island. At that time he was bought by a baron on the island. Later on, the baron followed the count to the battlefield, never to return. All of the fief's sprite worms died. Fearing punishment, the serfs began to flee. The old leathersmith also fled. After many twists and turns, he arrived at the flower town. At that time, the serfs all spread a rumor that the baron died in battle because his retainer knight, who was a serf, betrayed him. His followers were very angry and decided to slaughter all the serfs in the fief to avenge the baron. As the old leathersmith spoke of the past, he sighed endlessly. Perhaps he was lamenting his own ignorance at that time. This was a low-level rumor. Aristocrats attached great importance to serfs. The correct explanation should be, the baron died in battle and had no heir. The lord he followed, namely the Earl of Coral Island, reclaimed his fief including the serfs. In short, the old leathersmith's life was not full of ups and downs, nor was he a person with a story. Even his blindness had naturally happened while he was in the flower town. The only thing that could barely be regarded as a story was his identity as a native of the Dodo Island. Liszt carefully inquired about the Dodo Island situation and found out that it was only a very small island with no more than 300 natives. In the end, it was destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Apart from the few skull trees that remained, there was probably no development value. He was somewhat disappointed. He had thought that the person specifically mentioned by the smoke mission should be somewhat mysterious. He did not expect that it would be just an ordinary native. He still intended to complete the mission and obtain the book as a reward. He had brought Jesse with him in order to give him to the old leathersmith as a son. An orphan without parents, a widower without children, the two of them hit it off very well. It should be easy for them to form a father and son contract. But suddenly he had a bold idea. Why should I follow in the smoke mission's footsteps? I am not its puppet. I can directly ask the old leathersmith for the book, instead of relying on missions to obtain it. Liszt did not think that the old leathersmith had a lot of books. Therefore, he went straight to the point. Old Phil, I heard that you have a collection of books. I hope that you can sell them to me. Since the Sir Lord had spoken, the old leathersmith did not dare to disobey. He immediately agreed, Yes, Sir Lord. I have a collection of books but only one. I will offer it to Sir Lord. After saying that, he stooped and, with Jesse's help, fished out a wooden box from the cabinet filled with leather shoes. Jesse, the book is in the box, take it to Sir Lord. Jesse opened the box, took out a very thick book and handed it to Liszt. Liszt swept it with a glance and found that the book was not printed, but handwritten notes. The cover was written in Serpentines and another foreign language. He did not understand the foreign language. Chapter 93. Serpentine was the common language of the Steel and Iron Ridge Kingdom. As a vassal state, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire also used Serpentine. In addition to Serpentine, there were also many other languages on the continent, such as the Eagle Kingdom's Wind language, the Blast Furnace Kingdom's Rock language, the Unsetting Radiance Empire's High Clear language, the Blue Dragon Empire's Dragon language, and so on. Liszt's predecessor did not know foreign languages, so he did not recognize the strange characters on it. In fact, if he looked carefully, it would be better to say that it was not so much characters, but rather distorted drawings. The Diary of a Descendant of Philip's Sons, a very strange title. Old Phil, what language is this other text? He asked curiously. I do not know, Sir Lord. In fact, I am illiterate. This book is a relic of a native of the Fairy Island. He was a good friend of mine. I was in the same canoe with him, but he died at sea, leaving only this book. I keep it as a souvenir. So it is a relic with commemorative value. Then I will return it to you after I finish reading it. No, 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 Sir Lord, it is Old Phil's honor that you have taken a fancy to Old Phil's book collection. Old Phil hopes that you can accept it. Thank you, Sir Lord. Old Phil's leathersmith shop's business is much better now. Alright, I will buy it. Old Phil is willing to offer it to Sir Lord to express my respect for Sir Lord. I accept your respect, but I will still give you a reward. Liszt returned to the castle with the diary. He had Carter take out 3 silver coins and hand them to Jesse. A book was not worth 3 silver coins, but it was, after all, a relic with commemorative value. Jesse, give these 3 silver coins to Old Phil as a reward for this book. In addition, tell Old Phil that I like his stories very much. If he wants to add anything, he can do so at any time. Yes, master. After Jesse left, List did not immediately open the book, but instead summoned the smoke mission. A moment later, a faint smoke appeared in front of him, twisting into serpentines. What made List pleasantly surprised and nervous was that the serpentines were no longer the usual words. They were changing. The mission has changed. The serpentines persisted for a few seconds before the smoke gradually distorted, forming new serpentines. Mission. Unlike other worm stalks that safely enjoy nutrition, the bramble sprite's worm grass gazes into the distance in solitude. It has already lived for 8 years and is about to enter old age. However, its heart is still unwilling. Please supplement the bramble sprite's worm grass with nutrition. The mission reward is a new type of thorns. His uneasy heart settled back into his stomach and all that was left was surprise. It was a little risky for him to say goodbye to the smoke mission and announce that he was not a puppet that could only be led around. However, in his heart he was actually very worried that he would lose the smoke mission. Whether the smoke mission was a cheat or a mastermind behind the scenes, it was not something he could refuse. Moreover, there was no need to refuse. So far, the smoke mission had only benefits and no drawbacks. It helped him develop quickly. Even if there was a mastermind behind it, he probably couldn't resist it. Since he couldn't resist, he would just enjoy it. As a result, some despicable thoughts still lingered in his mind. If I can ride on a dragon, so what if I sell the 50 kilograms to the mastermind? As long as you let me enjoy the glory and splendor, the mastermind behind the scenes, I am willing to be your lackey. There was no response. Smoke missions sometimes had very little sense of existence. Now it seemed. He was at loggerheads with the smoke mission, but the smoke mission would not be at loggerheads with him. And it also proved that those mission rewards were not forcibly fabricated by the smoke mission. They originally existed. The smoke mission at most pushed the boat with the current, fiddled with the threads of cause and effect, and pry some of the trajectory of time. Like a gust of wind gently blowing the waves of the river of fate, whether it rotated left or right, it would eventually fall back into the river and return to calmness. Maybe one day I will understand the meaning of the existence of the smoke mission. As for now, I will just enjoy the cheat. With an open-minded mind, he shook off the worrying thoughts. What was left was full of joy. He saw the familiar word new species in the new mission reward. There were 2 new species missions before. The new species of tulip brought the magic ingredient black tulip, and the new species of mushroom brought the magic ingredient flame mushroom. What kind of magic ingredient would the new species of thorns bring this time? Not enough nutrition, right? Tomorrow, let the serfs transport the compost to the thorns worm's worm stock to supplement it with nutrition. The only regretful thing was that the thorns worm had lived for 8 years, which meant that it only had 2 years left to live. It seems that I have to find a way to get another thorns worm. There seems to be a young thorns worm in Tulip Castle. I should buy it sometime. Thorns were just small weed-like shrubs. The thorns worm was not of much use, so the price should not be too high. He waved his hand to disperse the smoke serpentines. List returned his gaze to the diary of a descendant of Philip the Son. A descendant of Philip the Son, this surname is a bit domineering. My retainer knight is also called Philip, but his surname, Wool, is obviously the difference between a chicken and a phoenix when compared to the author. List turned to the first page and saw a very abstract picture of the sun. Because it was handwritten, the sun was not very round, and the surrounding light was also a triangular smear. There were all kinds of messy stripes inside the sun. It looked like a 7-year-old child's doodle. Below the picture there was a paragraph of serpentines, perhaps a poem. Grandpa has such a tattoo on his back. He said that his father also had the same tattoo on his back. I asked him why my father didn't have it on his back, and neither did mine. He said that our ancestors had abandoned us, and that we could no longer bear the sun pattern. I don't understand what it means. Grandpa said that we were exiled from our hometown to the land of sin, and that we could only return after 500 years. 500 years later, a large ship sailing in the sky under the sun welcomed us back. 500 years have passed, but the ship in the sky has not come. Looking at the poem, List found it very interesting. The description in the poem was that the author's ancestors were a group of sinners and were exiled to the Dodo Island for 500 years. They tattooed a sun pattern on their back to represent their lineage. But 500 years later, the ship in the sky that was supposed to take them back did not come. So the author's grandfather felt abandoned and did not tattoo his son again. So this is how the descendants of the sun came to be. If the record is true, the natives of the Dodo Island should be the descendants of the great nobles of the continent. Only the great nobles, especially the descendants of the royal family, would be exiled after making a mistake. If the lesser nobles made a mistake, they would be directly killed. But without the habit of recording history, the royal family would probably forget about these exiled descendants in about 100 years. On the first page there was a picture and a poem. On the second page there was a preface. My name is Philip, 26 this year. I have just returned from working on the outer island. I do not intend to go out again. The outside is very prosperous, but life is difficult. I intend to stay on the Dodo Island and marry Valiza. I will have my own son and raise him. I am a carpenter, I can build a big house for him to live in. From today onwards I will record every day. This way, when I am old, I will not be like my grandfather, forgetting his story, forgetting even where we came from. My son, because of my diary, will understand what interesting experiences his father once had. But I don't have too much thick bast paper and ink, I have to write sparingly. Write a little smaller, a little smaller. Chapter 94. Grand Duchy Year 119, February 15th. This was the starting time of the first entry in the diary of a descendant of Philip's son. This year is the year 151 of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. In other words, this diary was written 32 years ago? Liszt did some simple calculations. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not have an official calendar, but it also did not use the calendar of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. The concept of history was not popular in other worlds. Generally speaking, people did not have any ideas about what happened in the past. They did not have the idea of using history as a guide. Therefore, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not even have a national day. The Seagoing Festival and the New Year's Day were the most important festivals. Sometimes, the founding anniversary celebration would be held during the Seagoing Festival, sometimes it would be arranged during the New Year's Day, and sometimes it would be casually celebrated on a day. This was carried out according to the wishes of the Sapphire Grand Duke. Liszt's analysis of this was that the concept of patriotism had not been spread out. The subtlety of the aristocratic system was reflected in the structure of knight enfeoffment. The greatest connotation was, the subject of my subject is not my subject, the master of my lord is not my lord. For example, Liszt's master was the Earl of Coral Island, but not the Sapphire Grand Duke. Therefore, as a subject of the Earl, he did not need to pay attention to the Sapphire Grand Duke. The Sapphire family could not order him. For him, his real kingdom was the Coral Island, not the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. If he wanted to love someone, it was the Coral Island, not the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. All aristocrats were lords. Even the king was just a slightly larger lord. Naturally, it was impossible to form a broad sense of patriotism. This was also why the Seagoing Festival was only commemorated by the aristocracy, while the commoners were simply unwilling to pay attention to it. In the Flower Town, the celebration of Liszt's birthday was definitely more important than the Seagoing Festival in the minds of the subjects. Sir Lord, who granted me land, is like a parent to me. Who is the Grand Duke? Can he be eaten? Steamed or braised? Liszt's train of thought was interrupted. Liszt continued to browse the diary. Ching climbed the trees and picked the fruits. Gather 10 human skull fruits, chop down 3 trees, dig the foundation and prepare to build a house. Sorting out the knowledge that Grandpa taught me, the X, in Sanskrit represents I. I am a descendant of the sun and my ancestors spoke Sanskrit. This X represented a very distorted character. It was very complicated and looked like a painting. It was like a little person with wings holding some kind of object in his hand and dancing. Each word is like a painting. Which country's language is this? It's too strange. I can guarantee that if it's written in this language, you won't be able to learn 500 words even if you're 100 years old. Liszt lamented. Of course, this was an exaggeration, but it was true that this so-called Sanskrit was very complicated. Following that, many pages of the diary were unimportant records of life. Picking fruits, chopping wood, building houses, exchanging items with so-and-so and seeing wild beasts. But at the end of every diary entry, there would be a Sanskrit. I dad, mom, grandpa, grandmother, big, rice, earth, sky, earth, horse, flower, good 10, picture, up. There were some words that Philip specifically explained. For example, rice referred to a certain kind of grain, horse referred to a unicorn, and flower referred to a sunflower. He had never seen them before, but he had heard from Grandpa that they were things that were common to his ancestors. Unicorn? Is there really such a legendary animal? Liszt expressed his doubts. He even expressed his doubts about these Sanskrits. They were just drawings of little people. He didn't think that these drawings represented any kind of language. It could be that Philip's grandfather came up with them to fool his silly grandson. A thick diary. Almost all of it was about Philip's boring daily life on the Dodo Island, as well as the teaching of Sanskrit. Occasionally he would recall his working life on the outer islands. He met the daughter of a noble, a very kind lady who taught them the language of commoners. Philip proudly said that he was the fastest learner and was valued by the noble lady. He even wanted to elope with her. But unfortunately, in one of the entries in the diary, the noble lady's mother found out about him and wanted to kill him. So Philip escaped the island with the help of the noble lady. He didn't say which island, saying that he didn't want to tarnish the noble lady's reputation. Apart from these things, the diary occasionally mentioned Philip's ancestors, mainly the stories his grandfather told him. For example, the ancestors raised a group of magical dragons with 2 heads, the ancestors had shot down the sun in the sky, the ancestors drew extraordinary power from the well, the ancestors lived in cities that grew out of trees, the ancestors were friends with wolves, bears, eagles, and tigers, and the ancestors were immersed in music. His grandfather called the ancestors the children of the sun, so the question is, why did the children of the sun shoot down the sun? Patricide? The story was fragmentary and vague. The main thing was that Philip wrote very briefly. He was worried that he didn't have enough ink and thick bast paper to write, so the more he wrote, the less he wrote. He even wrote once every few days. The thick bast paper was already half written. He probably understood that this diary could not record every little thing in his boring life. I can change the title to The Private Teaching Record of the Sun. Liszt was about to close the diary. He didn't find any connection between the diary and the bottle that couldn't be opened. He thought that he might as well smash the metal bottle. See what was in it? But just as he closed the book, because he closed it from the back to the front, the last page closed at the end, he suddenly found out from the corner of his eye that this page was not blank. He flipped it open. He discovered that it was another diary, or rather, an essay. My last words. Before my grandfather left, he told me that if one day a golden bottle was found on the sea, it would be a letter written to us by our ancestors. Our ancestors mastered a method of sending letters on the sea. The bottle filled with magic would follow the guidance of the bloodline and travel to and fro the sea. As long as the blood is smeared, the bottle can be opened and the letter can be taken out. I don't believe it, but my descendants, if one day you find it, remember to reply. This was the will written by the descendants of Philip Taiyang to their descendants, so it was placed at the end of the diary. After reading it, Liszt couldn't stay calm. The bottle that Philip was talking about must be the bottle that the fisherman picked up from the beach, which was now on his desk. Does this mean that the story of Philip and his grandfather is actually true, that they are really the exiled descendants of a noble family? Is the sun language also true? He recalled the previous task. It said, the bottle that can't be opened, the words that can't be read, and that he needed a book to guide him. There was no doubt that it was this book. Picking up the bottle, Liszt went straight out of the study. My lord, are you going out? I'm going to the leathersmith's shop. Mr. Carter, you stay in the castle and let Jessie come with me. By the way, is Jessie back yet? He remembered that Jessie had been sent to deliver the silver coins. Not yet, he should have gone to the town to watch a farce. You know, young people always like to join in on the fun. Chapter 95. Old Phil, cut your finger, I need you to smear your blood on this bottle. Liszt said in an indisputable tone. Philip was already dead, and it was unknown how many natives of the Dodo Island were left. The old leathersmith before him was probably one of them. As for whether he had the bloodline of the descendants of the sun, he did not know. He could only give it a try. Although the old leathersmith did not understand, he had to do as the Sir Lord commanded. He pricked his finger with a needle, squeezed out his blood, and smeared it on the beautiful golden bottle. Liszt had already cast magic eyes. He stared intently at the metal bottle. The moment the blood came into contact with the metal bottle, his whirlpool-like pupils suddenly widened, because he saw a magical scene. As if touched by the blood, faint magic power gushed out of the metal bottle and spread along the engraved patterns, quickly outlining the lines of a sun, a tree, a bow and arrow, a zither, an eagle, and a bear. A man made of lines emerged from the bottle, picked up the bow and arrow and shot an arrow at the sun. A woman made of lines emerged from the bottle, picked up the zither and gently played it under the tree. The eagle landed on the man's shoulder, the bear snuggled up to the woman, and the magic lines on the bottle were vivid and lively. Suddenly, the sun with the arrow on it fell, and a well made of lines appeared, spurting a fountain straight to the mouth of the bottle. Asterisk crack. Asterisk a crisp sound echoed. All the lines made of magic power dissipated, and no trace of magic power could be seen on the metal bottle. The mouth of the bottle, which was originally seamless, unexpectedly cracked. List gently pulled it out with his hand and the bottle cap fell off. He shook the mouth of the metal bottle downward and something rolled up into a small stick fell out. It was a very fine light parchment. List unfolded the parchment. Impressively, there was a line of drawings of little people on it. No, to be precise, it should be a line of sun characters. List had an impression of these drawings of little people, but he could not make out what they meant. There were many puzzles in his mind waiting to be solved. On the surface he was not the least bit anxious. He rolled up the parchment and glanced at the old leathersmith. "Old Phil, are you related to Philip?" "I don't know, Sir Lord. Perhaps Philip said that we are all exiled sinners. In fact, they should be related." Looking at the old leathersmith's stooped figure and aged expression, List felt that he should complete the last mission issued by the smoke. At the very least he should give the old leathersmith a son, or at the very least he should form a contract with Jesse. Regardless of whether it was from a moral point of view or if it was to help the mission, what should he do? "Phil, what do you think of Jesse?" "Jesse is a very good boy. He always comes to help me with things, diving, sweeping. Thanks to him the cobbler's shop smells so much better. Jesse is an orphan, you know?" "I know." "Have you ever thought that the two of you could form a contract as father and son?" "What this?" The old leatherworker was obviously a little alarmed. "Jesse is a servant of the castle, and I am just an old leatherworker. He has the means to live a better life and I don't want to burden him. Sir Lord, Jesse is a sensible child. He likes his work in the castle and is very hard-working. I will ask him not to come here again so as not to delay his work." He thought that his relationship with Jesse had made the Sir Lord unhappy. "You misunderstand, I have no intention of blaming Jesse, it is just a suggestion." List suddenly felt that doing this was a bit unfitting of his status as a noble. Why would the Lord care about the trivial matters of commoners? He got up and was about to leave the cobbler's shop, saying, "You decide this matter yourselves, I will hand it over to Mr. Carter to preside over." Success or failure, it was just a suggestion. After returning to the castle, he casually spoke to Carter, then directly put aside these chores and began to devote himself to translating the notes from the floating bottle. Comparing the diary of a descendant of Philip's son, he found the corresponding meanings of the little figures one by one. Soon he had finished translating the note. "The tower has collapsed, the tree city is burning, XX has perished, the child of the sun will rise with the flames, the children of the outside world, you are free." Among them, XX, was a group of sun characters, but there was no corresponding explanation in the diary, and the style of the drawing was rather abstract. List could not see its specific meaning, but he could roughly guess that it should represent the habitat of the child of the sun. Perhaps it was a country, perhaps it was a continent. In other words, the floating bottle had brought bad news. The child of the sun, which country's aristocracy calls itself that? List had read at least 100 night novels, if not 1,000, but there was no record of the child of the sun rubbing the parchment in his hand. He suddenly felt that this country was probably not a mainland country. The paper on the mainland is thick bast paper made of animal leather, which is not easy to preserve and is not convenient to write on. But the parchment in my hand does not seem to be made of animal leather, it is very thin. This technology has not yet appeared on the mainland. But apart from the mainland countries, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was the first country to go to sea and establish a country. Immediately, List thought of a possibility. Is it possible that the child of the sun is not a human of this continent, but on the other side of the Aquamarine Sea? The east coast of Flower Town faced the Aquamarine Sea, and the other side of the Aquamarine Sea was the legendary Devil Sea. No one could sail in the Devil Sea. The legend was not credible. If this other world was also a planet, then perhaps the so-called Devil's Sea was just a larger ocean than the sea on Earth. On the other side of the ocean there may be a continent. There was an impassable ocean between the continents. Perhaps there was another continent where humans lived. Well, there is too little information to make any effective judgments. Let's assume that there is a continent on the other side, and there is a group of humans called the Child of the Sun. List took back his distant thoughts. For the time being, I don't have the ability to solve this mystery. He put the metal floating bottle into the gem space, but he did not cap the bottle, in case it could not be opened. The thin parchment was also put into the gem space, as well as the diary of a descendant of the son of Philip. Now it's time to shift our focus to the Thorn's worm. At the age of 8, the Thorn sprite worm was unwilling to die of old age alone and wanted to fight with all its might. List could feel that this thorn sprite worm was indeed somewhat different from other sprite worms. He arrived at the worm house, which was under the care of Carter, and saw the thorn sprite sleeping soundly in a box. Sprite worms could sleep 24 hours a day. The faintly discernible spiritual connection allowed List to understand his sprite worms at all times. Little guy, I can feel the lethargy in your body, and I can also feel your desire for evolution. Although I know that there is little hope for you to evolve, I am still willing to help you and do my best. Not for the thorn potion and the completion of the smoke mission. List muttered to himself as he gently stroked the gray body of the thorn worm. The thorn sprite worm seemed to have sensed the arrival of List. It opened its sesame-sized eyes and turned to look at List. Among the 7 sprite worms, it was the ugliest one. It was darker in color than the other sprite worms, and its body was more slender and its skin was harder. Sprite worms bred by woody plants such as shrubs and trees would always appear rougher than sprite worms bred by herbaceous plants. Its black eyes were indiscernible. However, List could feel that the thorn sprite worm was close and docile to him. Chapter 96. The thorn sprite worm's stalk grew on the dairy farm, close to the edge of the Thorns Ridge in a small thorns forest. The reason why the Thorns Ridge was so named was that there were many short thorns on the periphery. However, thorns rarely grew on a large scale, instead they grew in small patches of 2s and 3s. List, who had investigated this, guessed that the reason was probably because thorns were shrubs, short trees without an obvious trunk and in a clumped state. The correct name for a thorns forest should be a thorn shrub. Attached to the edge of the arbor forest, the tall arbor blocked the sun and limited the growth of the shrubs. The thorn sprite worm is unwilling. Apart from the lack of nutrition, it is also likely due to the growth of the thorns forest. The arbor blocks the expansion of the thorns shrub. South of the thorn sprite worm stalk was the dairy farm. It was impossible for List to shovel the pasture and plant worthless thorns. Therefore, he intended to organize a logging team to cut down the surrounding trees of the thorns shrub to provide for the thorns to expand outwards. The more thorns there were, the wider the range of influence of the thorn sprite worm, the more pheromones it could collect, and the greater the possibility of evolution. In fact, he understood that it was almost impossible for the thorn sprite worm to evolve. There were too few varieties of thorns and the collection of pheromones was difficult. The probability was too low. Although I do not know the essential reason for the evolution of the sprite worm, the more plant varieties the worm stalk belongs to, the greater the possibility of the sprite worm evolving. Affecting the growth of the plant will also increase the probability of the sprite worm evolving. This was something that could be followed from experience. The tulip family had collected a large number of tulip varieties for several generations. It was precisely by relying on these tulip varieties that the greater sprite Xiangxiang, as well as 3 lesser sprites and 8 sprite worms were cultivated. Of course, it was not that the thorn sprite worm had no chance to evolve. It was still necessary to have a dream just in case it came true. I will do what I can. The rest is up to the thorn sprite worm itself, whether or not it is truly unwilling to challenge its fate. After stroking the thorn sprite worm, List left the worm house. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the person in charge of the North Valley City caravan came to the castle and bid farewell to List. The person in charge, a bearded middle-aged man named Gabriel, bowed deeply. "Sir Baron, under your governance, the Flower Town has shone with dazzling light. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. The caravan had a wonderful day in Flower Town." Now Gabriel takes his leave. "Are you satisfied with the trade the caravan made in town?" List asked with a smile. "Very satisfied, Sir Baron. The faces of the caravan members are brimming with harvest smiles. We sold a lot more goods here than we expected and also purchased some specialties of Flower Town. Personally, I like the environment of the commercial district very much. There are no more problems with feces." "So, Gabriel, does the caravan have a plan? When will they come again?" "Not yet. However, I think that the road through the Thorns Ridge is already safe. The caravan will not wait too long. Perhaps after a month, we will be loaded with goods and come to the Flower Town to trade. The Flower Town welcomes the caravan at any time." "Thank you, Sir Baron." Gabriel bowed and left the castle. The caravan returned to the caravan, which had already tidied up its goods from the commercial district and was slowly setting out on its journey. Horses pulled carriages along the road paved with gravel and sea sand. Illuminated by the setting sun, they headed in the direction of the Thorns Ridge. When they came, they were loaded with goods. When they left, they were full of laughter. There was also the beautiful sound of gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins colliding with each other. After a while, Old Grandette came forward to report on the shopping. Apart from the two foals, there were a lot of things which were handed over to the butler Carter and placed in the castle's cellar. List, who didn't like these mundane tasks, went straight to the stud farm to look at the foals. The two foals in the stud farm were probably just born. They were very afraid of strangers and hid in a corner of the stable, not daring to run around. They were very ordinary breeds, one brownish red, the other brownish yellow. Even though List didn't know much about horses, he could still see that they couldn't go to the battlefield. Is it a mare or a stallion? A mare and a stallion, sir. Jim, who was feeding foals, replied. Take care of them, don't let other horses bully them. Yes, sir. Soon after, List circled around a separate fence. There were a few pregnant mares eating wheat bran and peas, and no changes could be seen. When Fiery Dragon saw him arrive, it affectionately leaned over and stuck its head out of the fence. List reached out and patted it. He was looking forward to whether the foal it gave birth to would be as spirited as Black Dragon. It might even be mixed with World of Warcraft's bloodline. Maybe its foal would be even more spirited than Black Dragon. The banquet. It was time to celebrate the caravan's successful transaction in the flower town, as well as the time to report on the work. Sir Baron, the transaction amounted to a total of 7 gold coins, 63 silver coins and 12 copper coins. In accordance with the low tax rate preferential plan you formulated, the fixed booth tax and the 20% first-rate mobile tax amounted to a total of 18 silver coins and 15 copper coins. Isaiah gave a detailed report on the taxes. Caravan transactions definitely had to be taxed. Normally, lords would tax foreign caravans at a rate of 1 in 10, which was a tenth of the transaction's value. Some harsh lords might adopt the standard of 1% of the transaction value, which was 5% of the transaction value. In the flower town, in order to attract caravans, List greatly reduced the tax rate. He set 2 standards. One was the fixed booth tax. After paying the booth tax, it was a fixed amount of 1 silver coin. No matter how much the transaction value was, there would be no additional tax. The other was the 20% mobile tax. In other words, instead of paying the booth tax, a tax of 1% of the total transaction value would be collected. This gave merchants a choice. If they felt that their transaction value was more than 20 silver coins, it would be worthwhile to pay the fixed tax. If it was less than 20 silver coins, it would be worthwhile to pay the mobile tax. With the current situation in the flower town, there was not much business tax. List did not intend to make a fortune in this regard. The business tax does not need to be remitted to the castle's account. It should be used to build the commercial district. Stalls, parking spaces, livestock stalls, hotels and toilets should also be repaired in time. In addition, the wells and sewers should be planned together. Although there is plenty of time, I hope to complete them as soon as possible. Please rest assured, sir. Gort nodded in agreement. Carl, tell me about today's public security. Yes, sir. It was not Carl's first time attending a banquet, but he was still cautious. The patrols performed very well. We arrested a total of 13 merchants who urinated and defecated everywhere and punished them with whippings. There was also 1 thief whom Gabriel ransomed. Among the thief's residents, 2 thieves and 3 forced buyers and sellers were caught. List asked, did you tell the person in charge of the caravan, Gabriel, that if a thief is caught the first time he can pay a ransom, but if caught the second time he will be directly detained and demoted to the thief's laborers? I've already informed Gabriel. He said that when he returns he will teach the thieves a good lesson. When the caravan returns he will make sure that no one disobeys your rules. Carl hesitated for a moment before continuing. My lord, how are we going to punish the 5 criminals? Freedmen or serfs? There is 1 freedman each for the thieves and the forced buyers and sellers, while the remaining 3 are serfs. List looked at Gort. Gort immediately said, Sir, you attach great importance to the caravan trade. You have repeatedly publicized it, yet there are still bold commoners who ignore the rules. They should be severely punished. In my opinion, serfs should be punished with 50 lashes and have all their property confiscated. Freedmen who commit theft should be punished with 10 lashes and 10 times the fine. Those who are unable to pay should be demoted to serfs. As you wish. List agreed. Chapter 97. Before dawn the next day, serfs were busy fishing out manure from the manure cellars of the settlements. The manure was carried by the serfs in the direction of the dairy farms. The disbanded logging team also regrouped. Escorted by the night squad, they arrived at the bushes where the Thorns Worm's worm stock was located. Marcus, with a falcon feather arrow on his back, scouted the bushes to make sure that there was no World of Warcraft lurking in the surroundings, then turned to Gort and nodded. "Sir, the surroundings are safe." "That's good." Gort turned around and yelled at the serfs, "Get your spirits up and start working. After taking Sir Lord's copper coins, whoever dares to slack off will definitely be whipped to death by me. Remember, do not touch the thorns. Cut down all the other trees. Do not leave a single one behind." The serfs complied one after another. Then they started cutting down trees. They did not know why they came here to cut down trees, but the town official had ordered them to do so. Moreover, they could get paid 2 copper coins a day. After a short while, the manure team arrived. Gort hurriedly directed the serfs to fertilize the thorns. The treasurer, Isaiah, followed them. He calculated the remuneration of each serf. After counting the number of workers, he recorded the data on thick bast paper. He stretched and chatted with Gort. "What do you think Sir Baron is thinking? Why does he take care of the thorns worm?" "I don't know either, but my lord always has a motive for doing this." "Gort, you are getting more and more involved in the flower town." "Why not? The development here is full of vitality. I will probably spend the rest of my life here. Therefore it is a good thing to develop it, isn't it? I am not used to living in the barren countryside, but there are still many interesting things to look for in the rich countryside. Of course, no one likes poverty. For Sir and for ourselves, Isaiah, we have to work hard." Gort glanced at his old friend. Recently, the other party was also a bit tempted to follow List. "I think, yes." The town's officials, Gort, Blair, Carl and Marcus, all became List's followers. As the only official who had yet to follow him, Isaiah naturally felt the pressure. Gort didn't say much. The final decision still depended on Isaiah. "Isaiah, let's go check the thorn shrubs to see if there are any special thorns. Sir has said that the thorn sprout worms have been a little restless recently. Perhaps there has been a change in the thorns bushes." "Then what am I waiting for? I have to search carefully. If I find a magic ingredient thorn, tsk. That's right, the shiitake settlement's flame mushroom, haven't you figured out the ingredients yet?" Gort spread his hands. "It's not that easy. We tried to plant flame mushrooms with all kinds of ingredients, but all of them failed. If it weren't for the flame mushrooms still growing in Crooked Bob's shiitake shed, we might have screwed up the flame mushrooms. Master values the flame mushrooms so much that I don't even know how to report it." The cultivation of the flame mushrooms was in a difficult situation. Gort had already mobilized all the shiitake farmers to distribute the flame mushroom seeds for them to cultivate. Unfortunately, all of them ended in failure. It was said that Crooked Bob had a demonic disease. He stayed in his shed without rest and watched the flame mushrooms grow. However, he couldn't understand why his shed could grow flame mushrooms. After rearranging the ingredients, the flame mushrooms would always wither and die. "Maybe we should tell Sir Baron. Sir Baron will have a good suggestion." "Why do you say that?" "Gort, don't you think that Sir Baron is very knowledgeable? He knows a lot and his vision is broader than all of us. He can see the vast world that we can't." "Oh, is that how you see, sir?" In fact, it was Marcus who said it. This retainer knight, who wants to be a noble, admires Sir Baron very much. Gort pondered for a moment. "Maybe I should report to Sir Baron. The flame mushrooms is not something that I can show off." He wanted to show himself to win the position of advisor. But he knew that if he messed up the flame mushrooms, List would probably kill him. Anyone could estimate the importance of magic ingredients to a lord. At noon, List came to the Thorns Worms wormstalk bush to inspect the progress. He also asked if there were any unusual species of thorns. The officials didn't find anything. List himself used magic eyes and didn't see any unusual thorns. Now he had confirmed that the smoke mission couldn't create rewards out of thin air. The rewards really existed in this world. As long as he was willing to dig, even if he didn't pass the mission, he could still get the reward. This gave him a lot of choices. He could choose to complete the mission and let the smoke mission send the reward to him. It was easy and pleasant. He could also choose to avoid the mission and directly get the reward to refresh the new mission. He even thought that maybe the mission would fail, but he didn't know what kind of punishment there would be after the mission failed. Would it be the punishment to keep the reward away from him or some other additional punishment? Or if the mission failed, would there be a new mission? Maybe one day I can try the consequences of failing the mission. However, if I can complete the mission, I should try my best to not create bad consequences. List shook his head. List was no longer confused. Since he couldn't find any abnormalities with the thorns, he could only wait for the mission to be completed to get a new species of thorns. Gort came over. "Sir, there may be a problem with the cultivation of the flame mushrooms. What problem? List suddenly became nervous. We arranged for all the serfs who grow the shiitake to get the flame mushroom seeds, but no one succeeded in making the flame mushroom seeds grow. It seems that the flame mushrooms can only grow in Crooked Bob's shiitake shed. But we can't find any difference between his shiitake shed and other shiitake sheds. Almost a month had passed. The flame mushrooms still hadn't been cultivated. List felt that there must be a big problem. In fact, he had been paying attention to it, but he was willing to give the serfs time to solve it. The Lord didn't have to work himself every day. He didn't expect to wait for a month. The distributed flame mushroom seeds didn't show the slightest sign of survival. It stood to reason that the cultivation of mushrooms was very fast. After the spores germinated, it basically took a few days for the mycelium to grow into a fruiting body, and it could be picked in less than 2 months. But the flame mushroom seeds, mycelium, couldn't survive at all. The serfs had already changed various ingredients and environments, but it still didn't work. Without professional scientific research personnel, List could only let Gort lead the way to the shiitake settlement to do on-site research. List wanted to see if he could deduce some reasons with his own knowledge. He arrived at the shiitake settlement. Looking at the haggard crooked-neck Bob whose eyes were bloodshot, he immediately knelt on the ground, his whole body trembling. Sir Lord, Bob is a good-for-nothing. He couldn't even cultivate the flame mushrooms for a month. List didn't blame Bob. He just asked Bob about the process of cultivating the flame mushrooms in detail. After listening, he swept his gaze over the flame mushrooms and released magic eyes, trying to find the root of the problem. He looked at the sporadic flame mushrooms growing on the shiitake ingredients, and then looked at the flame mushroom seeds among the new ingredients. He found something that was a little puzzling. For a normal flame mushroom, magic power was a condensation process. Including the flame mushroom seeds it produced, it was also constantly condensing magic power. But after inoculation, the flame mushroom seeds in the new ingredients could not condense magic power, and would slowly lose magic power. Chapter 98. List could see the loss of magic power, but he was not a wizard and could not investigate the nature of the loss. But as a scientifically minded transmigrator, he had his own unique views. What is the biggest difference between the shiitake ingredients and the new ingredients? According to Crooked Bob, most mushrooms have similar growth conditions. At most, there are some differences in temperature, humidity, and nutrition. But the flame mushroom can grow in the shiitake ingredients, which shows that it is not so resistant to the shiitake ingredients. After exploring the new ingredients for a long time and trying all kinds of ratios, the flame mushroom seed still cannot survive. This should not be a problem with the ingredients. If it is not a problem with the ingredients, then what is the problem? After a moment, he made an inference. The biggest difference between the shiitake ingredients and the new ingredients was that the shiitake ingredients grew on the shiitake ingredients. The shiitake settlement had been growing shiitake for many years and had not been invaded by other mushrooms, yet it produced the flame mushroom. This showed that the flame mushroom was likely a variant of shiitake. This kind of mutation might not be the formation of an independent new species, but a kind of companion species in the growth of shiitake mushrooms. Mushrooms were fungi. Fungi were always strange, and the mycelium of shiitake and flame mushroom might be entangled with each other and promote each other. Therefore, he said, Teacher Gort, inform the participating serfs to cultivate the flame mushroom seeds and shiitake seeds together and see if it is possible. Cultivate together? Gort didn't quite understand, but he still did as he was told. When Crooked Bob heard List's words, he became spirited. Sir Lord, Bob will try to cultivate together. We must cultivate the flame mushrooms for Sir Lord. Remember not to touch this shiitake shed, and don't destroy the environment in which the flame mushrooms grow. List then gave a heavy warning. It didn't matter if the cultivation of the flame mushrooms was slow, he hadn't reached the realm where he needed to rely on medicine to improve his chi. But if he killed all the flame mushrooms he would go crazy. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. List went to the thorns worm stalk shrubs every day to check on the progress of the fertilization and logging work. The logging team was experienced, especially after the blacksmith shop forged a batch of sharp axes, which increased the efficiency of cutting trees. A large circle of trees around the shrubs were all chopped down. Basically, all the trees in the area that the brambles worm stalk could affect were all cut down. Fiery Dragon quietly ate the weeds. It was pregnant, but it was not obvious. It was normal to ride it. According to Marcus, it would be fine to continue riding it for the next few months. Inside the box, the thorns worm was lying on the jade powder, squirming comfortably. In the past few days, List could clearly feel that the thorn worm was in high spirits and was always in a state of excitement. This was very abnormal. Under normal circumstances, sprite worms had very little emotional fluctuations. After all, no matter how magical a sprite worm was, it was still an insect in essence. An insect could not be expected to show its emotions on its face. Could it be that this little guy really wants to evolve? As soon as this thought appeared, he quickly extinguished it, because the possibility of success was too small. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. It was better not to have unrealistic fantasies. At this moment, Blair, who was in charge of supervision, walked over. "My lord. Did you find anything?" Blair was a little hesitant, but he still said, "I don't know if I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but there are many thorny sprouts around the shrubs. They're like grass growing out of the soil. They're already half a finger long." List raised his eyebrows. List followed Blair to check the thorn seedlings. Indeed, in the clearing where the trees were cut down, thorn seedlings emerged from the pile of fallen leaves. They were very young but very spirited. Thorns were not like the species on Earth. They were simply small thorny shrubs that could grow up to the height of a person. They were not poisonous, did not flower, and did not bear fruit. Their reproduction relied on the continuous expansion of their roots and the growth of new seedlings. Strictly speaking, thorns belonged to the category of weeds, while the thorns worm was a wild sprite. In the untrodden wild jungle, there would always be a small number of naturally bred sprites. However, the wild vegetation was very messy and the land was barren. The probability of sprite worms being bred was very low. It was far less than the species cultivated by humans for a long time, which bred sprite worms. Moreover, it was also difficult to guarantee the species of the sprite worm in the wild. It might be a weed or it might be a poisonous fruit tree which had relatively low value. The thorns worm was contracted by humans, and its greatest use was to build hedges. In particular, some greater aristocrats would plant hedges on the periphery of their manors to isolate the aristocrats from the commoners. In Flower Town, the thorns worm was not very useful. The castle outside had been transformed into a horse farm, and there was no need for hedges to isolate it. In any case, it was still a sprite worm and List still had to cultivate it. "There are so many thorn seedlings here, did they all grow in the past 2 days?" He gently pulled out a seedling. It was very tender, but there was no trace of magic power flowing on it. "I didn't pay much attention at the beginning." Blair shook his head. "Not only did I not notice, but the serfs also did not notice. It seemed that they grew overnight." List carefully examined it. It was indeed not the magic ingredient thorns he had imagined, but just an ordinary thorn seedling. He decided to summon the smoke mission first to see the situation. When the smoke twisted into serpentines, he suddenly realized, mission completed. Reward, fast-growing thorns. This meant that the thorns worm stalks nutrition mission had been completed. Unfortunately, the reward was not the magic ingredient thorns, but a kind of fast-growing thorns. Fast-growing thorns, what use do I have for this thing? List sighed inwardly. Not every smoke mission would bring him a generous reward. He no longer felt conflicted and turned to look at the newly issued mission. Mission: without the destruction of the fruit-stealing monkeys, the fragrant coconut trees can finally bear mature fragrant coconuts. Only, the fragrant coconuts of one of the fragrant coconut trees seem to be somewhat different. Please find out the reason. Reward: a sprite worm. After reading the mission, the regret he felt just now was quickly soothed and replaced with excitement. Why was the fragrant coconut tree's fragrant coconut different? Because it was breeding a fragrant coconut tree sprite worm. A familiar routine, a familiar reward. List shifted his line of sight away from the thorns seedling and said to Blair, "Do not stop fertilizing the shrubs. However, stop logging and build fences instead. Keep a close watch and record the growth of the thorn seedlings." "As you wish." After a moment, List appeared in the oyster settlement. The construction of the oyster settlement's houses wasn't fast. With great difficulty, the several hundred serfs were settled down. The houses were no longer built in a disorderly manner. Instead, they were arranged in an orderly manner according to List's personal sketches. There was a huge square near the sea in the residential area. In the square, there was a hill made of colorful shells, symbolizing the oyster settlement's specialty, seafood. On the beach of the east coast, there were clusters of tall fragrant coconut trees. Below one of the fragrant coconut trees near the oyster settlement was a slightly larger house and yard, the fruit-stealing monkeys' training ground. The few serfs who were the best at domesticating the fruit-stealing monkeys lived here. They had already been liberated from the fields and the sea to train and raise the fruit-stealing monkeys, becoming glorious, fragrant coconut farmers. Sir Lord. Upon seeing List, the several fragrant coconut farmers knelt down and saluted. Chapter 99. The east coast was a few kilometers long, with a total of 171 fragrant coconut trees of various sizes. The small fragrant coconut trees might only be a few meters tall, and some even had just sprouted seedlings. The largest fragrant coconut tree, the one where the winged peregrine falcon and the fruit-stealing monkeys fought, was nearly 60 meters tall and slanted towards the sea. List rode Fiery Dragon and hid in the shade of the tallest fragrant coconut tree. He guessed that if a sprite worm was really born, then it must be this tree king. The worm stalk was far larger, stronger, and more spirited than ordinary plants. If it were before, he would have had to search tree by tree to determine if it was a worm stalk. But now it was different. He directly released magic eyes and looked at the top of the 60-meter-tall fragrant coconut tree. There was a slight change in his field of vision. Faint light blue magic power was circulating in the canopy at the top. It was not very clear, but it was enough. There are traces of magic power. Sure enough, this fragrant coconut tree has already become a worm stalk. My 8th sprite worm is about to arrive. However, this sprite worm climbed a bit high. List thought about it and decided not to investigate it himself. Climbing a tree was really unbecoming of a lord. He turned to look at the fruit farmer on the side. Your name is Giggs. Are you the manager of the fruit-stealing monkeys training ground? Giggs nodded hurriedly. Yes, Sir Lord. Can you climb trees? Yes. Then climb the tree and be careful not to damage the bark. Go up and see if there is anything unusual about the fragrant coconut. Yes, Sir Lord. Giggs immediately used his hands and feet to climb the canopy. Although not as fast as the fruit-stealing monkeys, he was still steady and arrived at the canopy little by little. A moment later, Giggs climbed down and began to report. My lord, it's very strange. There's a fragrant coconut that looks ripe and very sweet. It's also very, very big. Oh, it's as big as a wash basin. A normal fragrant coconut was about the size of a big bowl. Now that there was a wash basin-sized fragrant coconut, there was no doubt that there was a sprite worm hidden inside. List smiled. Giggs, remember, this tree is a worm stalk and the fragrant coconut is giving birth to my sprite worm. You have to look after this tree for me. You are not allowed to touch the fragrant coconut, and you have to go up and observe it once a day. If the fragrant coconut cracks, inform the castle immediately, understand? Heavens, is that a sprite worm? Unbelievable. Giggs was overjoyed and hurriedly replied, Sir Lord, please rest assured, Giggs will definitely guard the sprite worm. He nodded lightly. List concentrated and summoned the smoke mission. He felt a little smug. He had just completed a smoke mission half an hour ago, and now he had completed another one. This efficiency was too high. As expected. Smoke serpentines, mission completed. Reward, fragrant coconut sprite worm. In a flash, a new mission appeared. The new milky bread brought by the caravan made Rainer of the bakery have a flash of inspiration. He wants to make a new kind of bread, and perhaps adding some meat would be a good idea, but he is very distressed that he can only sell black bread. Please help him realize the development of a new kind of bread. Reward, shipwreck treasure. Shipwreck treasure? List's eyes shone. When he saw the word treasure, he couldn't help but feel excited. What could be more exciting than finding a treasure and obtaining an unexpected windfall? The mission must be completed. Rainer wants to make a new kind of bread, adding some meat? Is he going to invent meat floss bread? The cooking industry in this world was still stuck in a very primitive state of food processing. Barbecued meat, grilled fish, boiled eggs, boiled meat, fried steak, cold salad. Sauce was invented and people liked to put some sauce on everything they ate. Milk was limited to making cheese and pudding and people liked to stuff minced meat into it. The most frightening thing was that people liked to add intact ingredients to the paste and roast them. They called it pie. Mrs. Abby used to be very good at a kind of food called shiitake pie. The specific method was to mix flour, sugar, and oil into a paste, then sprinkle the whole shiitake mushroom into the paste and put it into the oven to roast. Thus a shiitake pie was ready. List really couldn't get used to eating this pie. He always felt that it was an insult to his taste buds, even his IQ. But many times he had to endure the devastation of this dark cuisine. He deeply regretted not going to the New Oriental to learn how to cook. 800 stainless steel beds, 200 people. Bread was the staple food of another world. From the king to the serfs, Everyone ate bread. It was just that the aristocrats ate white bread while the poor ate black bread. The aristocrats certainly had their own requirements for food. Unfortunately, the talent of the chefs was limited. After so many years, white bread was still white bread and black bread was still black bread. How do you make meat floss bread? Liszt recalled the meat floss bread he had eaten. It seems that you sprinkle some meat floss on top of the bread? But how do you make meat floss? He couldn't figure it out. He quickly put away his thoughts, gave a few instructions to the fruit farmers, mounted his horse and left the oyster settlement. The retainer knight had already gone to inform Gort. Liszt didn't need to worry about the protection of the fragrant coconut tree's cordyceps. He was ready to set off for the town's bakery to inspect the lives of the commoners. The bakery was located in the most conspicuous location in the town. It was a rare two-story wooden building. Bread was sold on the first floor, while the baker's family lived on the second floor. The bakery mainly offered two kinds of services. One was to sell all kinds of black bread and the other was to bake bread. Not all serfs could afford to buy black bread. Most of them used the bakery's oven to bake the black bread with their own bran and other materials. Raynal was a freedman as well as the town's wealthiest freedman. Reportedly, his family property was worth as much as 5 gold coins. He was fully deserving of being the flower town's richest man. However, there were also people who said that the old drunkard was the richest man. He had sold his blacksmith shop to the lord for 3 gold coins. Despite his good wine, but his blacksmithing skills still brought the old drunkard a lot of wealth. At this time, Raynal was guarding the oven, waiting for a new batch of bread to come out of the oven. However, he was a bit distracted. He was one of the few people in the town who could regularly taste white bread. A few days ago the caravan had brought milk bread. He had bought a bit and tasted a different and wonderful taste. It also made him understand that bread could be made to taste better. Can I make better bread? In the past he wouldn't have even thought about it. Because even if he could make it, no one in the town could afford it. But now it was different. The road to the Thorns Ridge had been opened. The castle's caravan would go out to trade practically every 3 days. He could go with the caravan and sell his bread outside. It would be fine as long as he could go to the North Valley City, where many aristocrats lived. Moreover, I can also sell it to Sir Lord. Raynal recalled the day the caravan arrived. When he met Mrs. Abbey, he chatted with her and learned that she could only make the simplest white bread. Sir Lord should be tired of the monotonous white bread. Most of the caravan's milk bread has been bought by the castle. At this moment. Chapter 100. Inside the bakery, Liszt saw the fair and plump Raynor. He didn't show much concern for his subjects, nor did he show a kind and amiable demeanor. He went straight to the point. Raynor, how long have you been making bread? I started making bread when I arrived at the flower farm, Sir Lord. I have been making bread for 18 years. Said Raynor respectfully. My mother used to be a kitchen maid in Tulip Castle. She taught me how to make bread. When Sir Count opened the flower farm in Flower Town, I followed him. The history of Coral Island's development could no longer be verified. It was said that before the Grand Duke came overseas to establish a nation, Coral Island was already inhabited by humans. Later, Sapphire Grand Duke declared Coral Island to be owned by the kingdom and sent officials to govern it. It was already 20 years ago when Lee William Tulip was conferred the title of Earl of Coral Island due to his military exploits. At that time, Levis was just 2 years old and Elvira and Liszt had not yet been born. In those years, the Count bought serfs wantonly to enrich Coral Island and reclaim the wasteland. 18 years ago, a new tulip was discovered in Flower Town, for which the Count reclaimed the flower farm. At its peak, tulip reached 200 mu, and the small castle was built at that time. The following year, 17 years ago, as more and more serfs gathered on the flower farm, Flower Town was built. Raynor went from being a baker who made bread for the flower farm to being a baker in a small town and settled down there. Life in the small town was hard, but Raynor quite enjoyed it. In a flash, 18 years passed. He had become the richest commoner in Flower Town. Liszt then asked, "Have you been making black bread?" "I occasionally make some white bread, especially on New Year's Day. Also, when commoners get married, they will order a little white bread from me." "How is your white bread craftsmanship?" "I don't know, Sir Lord. But Mrs. Abbey of the castle has tasted my white bread, and she says it tastes very good." Next to him, Raynor's wife suddenly interjected, "Sir Lord, Mrs. Abbey also said that she wants to study milk bread with Raynor. She said that Sir Lord likes it very much." "Sir Lord didn't ask you anything. Who allowed you to speak?" Raynor glared at his wife before hurriedly apologizing. "I'm sorry, Sir Lord. Rebecca is a foolish woman. She has offended your dignity, Sir Lord. List didn't mind. He was not a prickly nobleman who could not take the slightest offense. Besides, he did not feel that Rebecca's interjection was an offense. On the contrary, he was very happy that Abby was cooperating with Rainier to make milk bread. He was supportive of food research, so he said with a smile, "Rainier, the castle needs bread with a better texture. Since you have communicated with Mrs. Abby, then very well, create more bread with different tastes. Don't be afraid of not being able to sell it. As long as it tastes good, the castle will purchase it in large quantities." Rainier was overjoyed. This was exactly what he wanted. He accepted the order on the spot and said, "Sir Lord, please rest assured, Rainier and Mrs. Abby will definitely study milk bread and more new types of bread with a wonderful taste. I look forward to it." List got up and added, "I like to add a little meat to bread, but the roasted meat is too dry and hard to match with bread. Perhaps you can try to make the meat very soft, like mixing it with bread. Perhaps it will taste good." Rainier will remember. It was estimated that Rainier and Abby would have to study for at least 10 days to half a month before they could make meat floss bread or some other new type of bread. At least, before List attended Levis's birthday party, he would not be able to complete this task. Soon it would be August 16th. There were only 3 days left before Levis's birthday. After his birthday, Levis would be 23 years old. At his age, the Count and Melissa had already given birth to him. However, Levis had not found a suitable marriage partner and remained single. Lord Knight Loudon sent Levis's birthday invitation from Tulip Castle. After receiving the invitation, the butler Carter began to get busy preparing the gift. "Master, are we really only going to use seafood as a birthday gift?" he asked with some uncertainty. List had told him to just send some seafood as a gift. However, seafood was the cheapest food in the flour town, even cheaper than rye bread. It was everywhere on the East Coast. Not only fishermen but even serfs would pick up some shells to eat. List read the book without raising his head. "Mr. Carter, apart from seafood, what other specialties of the flour town are worth bringing out?" This rhetorical question left Carter speechless. The remote town really did not have any praiseworthy specialties. He still tried his best to think. "Master, perhaps we can send some of the Thorns Ridge's wild fruits." No. I have been poisoned by eating wild fruits. Although I have already distinguished the types of wild fruits, but there are still risks." "Apologies, Master, I was rash. This is nothing. After all, the castle picks a lot of wild fruits every day. We are already used to it. I just feel that sending wild fruits is not a good sign." It was because of wild fruits that List had occupied his predecessor's body and memories. Of course, he would not disregard wild fruits. He had ordered people to pick and experiment on all the wild fruits in the Thorns Ridge. In the end, he found 2 types of poisonous fruits. One of them was the black date fruit that had poisoned his predecessor. The black date fruit was the size of a fist and was slightly purplish-black in color. The other wild fruits were edible. However, there was no guarantee that there were no poisonous wild fruits in the depths of the Thorns Ridge. The wild fruits were picked by the bold serfs from the fruit trees at the edge of the Thorns Ridge. There were also some fruit trees in the small town, but not many, and only a few fruits could be born. List had already ordered people to collect the seeds of all kinds of wild fruits, preparing to plant them in batches at the beginning of next spring. Unfortunately, there was no guarantee that they would germinate. Without sprite worms, the growth of wild fruit trees was bound to be a difficult process. It was not that the serfs had not thought of planting them, but that they could not survive. For the time being, the castle's wild fruits could only be picked from the Thorns Ridge. Rejected as a birthday gift, Carter did not know what gift he should send that was more suitable than seafood. Unexpectedly, List remembered that ordinary wild fruits from the Thorns Ridge were not suitable to send, but there were still many fragrant coconuts on the East Coast. Calculating the time, a batch of fragrant coconuts should have matured. "Mr. Carter, contact the fruit farmers and have them pick a bag of fragrant coconuts. Match the fragrant coconuts with seafood as a gift." "Yes, Master." August 19th. Early in the morning, List put on his leather armor and the red blood sword. When the sun had just risen, he set off with his retainer Knight, welcoming the warm wind. Chapter 101. Walking on the main road of the Thorns Ridge. List was still very satisfied. When he first came here, this road made him panic and he was constantly worried that World of Warcraft would suddenly appear. Now that he had a wide field of vision, he wasn't the slightest bit worried about World of Warcraft's invasion. The original dirt road had also taken on a brand new look. turning into a gravel road, although it was still bumpy. Marcus was riding the already pregnant yellow-gray horse, half a body's length behind List's black dragon. He was fully armed and fearless of the weather, which had already begun to heat up. He was not only a tutor who taught List knight lessons, but also a knight who was ordered by the count to protect List. In some countries such a knight was called chief knight, but the Grand Duchy did not implement this system. Behind List and Marcus was Karl Hammerstein, the town's defense officer. He didn't need to come, but he still volunteered to protect List. Perhaps he just wanted to take this opportunity to go to Coral City to see the scenery as well as to show his loyalty. Next to Karl were Philip Wool and Xavier Oxdung. These two young retainer knight were quite talented and were the first in the squad to cultivate chi. Behind them was Rome Winesong, who had also successfully cultivated chi the day before yesterday. As one of the first 4 retainers to serve as List retainers, Rome worked hard and finally made progress. List immediately appointed him as the patrol captain to assist Karl in managing the patrol. Unfortunately, the other 2 of the 4 retainers, Grey Sickle and Auden Shoe Shop, still hadn't cultivated their chi. Marcus had given up on teaching them. Their talent was too poor and they had missed their teenage years, so there was no hope. List had them serve as official assistants, one to assist the legal officer, Blair, and the other to assist the financial officer, Isaiah. To his own people, List was still sentimental and gave them a good status. At the end of the team were 4 young knights. They were second only to Philip and Xavier in the knight squad. They were also transferred to List's side as retainer knight. As for the other members of the knight squad, they were still diligently training in the small town. There was also his valet Thomas. The entire team consisted of 11 people and 11 horses. The hooves of the horses galloped, stirring up waves of sand and dust. As there were many pregnant Maras in the team, they did not move too fast. However, they still arrived at the Tulip Castle surrounded by a sea of tulip flowers at around 10:30 a.m. "Oh, my dear brother, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Levis was wearing a festive costume with a noble smile on his face. He opened his arms wide and welcomed List. It was a very warm welcoming etiquette. List dismounted from the horse and also opened his arms wide to hug Levis. "Dear brother, happy birthday. Thank you for your blessing." List waved to Thomas and the retainer knight behind him. "Bring the gifts I prepared." The gifts were presented and handed to Silva, the deputy steward behind Levis. "What is it?" "It's a very big bag. It seems you spent a lot." Levis let the valet open it. According to the custom here, gifts had to be opened in person. The gifts in the bag were beautifully wrapped. First, there were coconuts the size of large bowls wrapped in strips of cloth. They looked very classy and the faint fragrance of coconut milk hit their nostrils. "This is the fragrant coconut. The coconut milk inside is very fragrant and sweet. Open it and have a sip. Then you will know how sweet and delicious it is." List said exaggeratedly. In fact, it was only slightly better than the ordinary coconut milk on earth. However, the fruit that could be drunk directly was unique. Sure enough, Levis became curious. "Coconut milk? Is this fruit filled with milk?" "Yes. It's amazing. I can't wait to taste it." Levis turned to look at the other side of the bag. It was all wrapped in small bags. "What are these?" "It's seafood." "Seafood?" "Brother, don't think that they are ordinary. These seafood are the most precious seafood that fishermen catch. Especially the older oysters." Saying this, List moved closer to Levis's ear. "It can let you not sleep at night and let you do what you want to do." Levis's eyes lit up. "Really? This is too precious. Thank you, List, my dear brother. This is the best birthday gift I received." He was not married yet, but who said that unmarried nobles could not have a bunch of mistresses? After receiving the gifts, the 2 brothers walked into the castle side by side. The hall of the castle was already crowded with nobles, big and small. Apart from the 2 viscounts who sent their sons, the other baron and lord knight were present in person. After all, Levis was the heir of Coral Island, the future Earl of Coral Island, and the next lord they would follow. It's very lively. List had to put on a standard aristocratic smile and greet the aristocrats who came to the birthday party. He did not like this kind of massed communication. However, as a member of the aristocracy, such occasions were indispensable if he wanted to maintain the dignity of an aristocrat. After a round of greetings, he was going to pay a visit to the Count. But after asking Levis, he learned that the Count had already left Coral Island. The Grand Duke's messenger brought an order. All the direct feudal lords will go to Blue Dragon Island to discuss this year's development order. In fact, I am already training orders of chivalry, ready to follow my father to the continent at any time. The Development Order was the most popular order of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The order was very simple. It was to respond to the call of the King of Iron and Steel Ridge to go to the continent and plunder wealth, especially mines. Gold, silver, copper, iron, aluminum and all kinds of gems were the targets of contention. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Eagle Kingdom were enemies, and both countries had slaughtered each other's dragons. Therefore, a large-scale war broke out almost every year to plunder each other's mines. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was not strong, but it was very threatening to harass by sea. In the past, the Count had penetrated deep into the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom, seized an iron mine in one fell swoop, and plundered at least 200,000 tons of iron ore. It was said that at that time the ships pulling iron ore were densely packed, like ants moving house. Such a heavy loss. The king of the Eagle Kingdom was furious and sent a Dragon Knight to intercept the fleet, but was blocked by the Dragon Knight of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was also in that battle that Marquis Merlin Longtaro, the captain of the palace fleet, saw the potential of Lee William and married his daughter Melissa to him. Liszt had heard this story since he was a child. Every time at a banquet, the nobles would recall the past, and they would always mention this story to flatter the count. Unfortunately, since that battle, the Eagle Kingdom had paid more attention to the protection of the coastline, and there was no chance to achieve such a brilliant record. Every year, a batch of knights' blood was sacrificed, but only a small amount of metal and gem mines could be exchanged. "Brother, are you also going to the battlefield?" Liszt was a little surprised. "Yes, I am already 23 years old. Although I am not married yet, I am old enough. If I don't go to the battlefield, it will be a stain on my record." Liszt shook his head and pretended to be regretful. "I don't have a qualified knight team, and I don't even have the opportunity to go to the battlefield. I really want to fight side by side with my brother and win the glory of the knight." In fact, he did not want to go to the battlefield. Chapter 103. Liszt, do you see that? I planted 10 acres of black tulip. Sweet Fragrance, the great elf, flew in the sea of tulip flowers. Behind her was a patch of tulip that had not yet bloomed. The rows of tulip under the glaring sun were a little scratchy. At noon, not only would people be listless, but so would plants. Only the elves were still so carefree and energetic. Wow! Wow! The two little elves followed behind Sweet Fragrance, their mouths shouting some meaningless sounds. Elves were not social creatures, but elves of the same species could play together and share the different species of plants they had mastered with each other. These two tulip elves were Sweet Fragrance's attendants. Tulip Castle had always hoped that these two little elves could break through the shackles and evolve into new great elves. Planted at the end of June, they've already budded in less than 2 months. Liszt strolled between the fields, looking at the budding black tulip with excitement. In about a month, these tulip would turn into gold coins and flow into his pocket. Sweet Fragrance raised her beautiful head and said proudly, "Of course, these are the tulip I planted, and every seed has germinated under my care." That expression was clearly saying, "Come and praise me." Liszt smiled and praised, "Sweet Fragrance is amazing." I am amazing." Sweet Fragrance did 2 somersaults in the air. Wow! Wow! The two little elves imitated Sweet Fragrance's movements and also somersaulted in the air. Liszt, these black tulip are growing very well, their magic content is also abundant, and there are no obvious attributes. Compared to the 2 potions Tulip Castle has mastered, they are better, and mages have already come to place orders. Levis' tutor, Frank, accompanied Liszt. It will become the new pillar of Tulip Castle and make the family stronger. Brother will rely on it to continue father's footsteps and become a Sky Knight. I wholeheartedly agree with your words. Levis is extremely talented. There is no doubt that he will become a Sky Knight. At this time, Xiangxiang Bela had already been playing around for a while. She flew in front of Liszt and said with a smile, "I will help Levis break through. When the time comes, I will take him flying just like how I took you guys flying when you were young." When Liszt and the others were young, Xiangxiang Bela loved to grab them and fly into the sky. She watched as the little children screamed in fear. However, once they got used to the high altitude and stopped crying, Xiangxiang Bela was no longer interested in bringing them along. An elf with a wicked sense of humor. Liszt thought of these scenes and felt very warm. Xiangxiang loved to play around, but it had no intention of harming them. Because of the contract, it was very close to the Tulip family's bloodline. It will be memorable. It will be best if you can scare Levis to tears again. Xiang Bela said regretfully, I can't scare Levis to tears now. When he becomes a Sky Knight, it will be even more difficult to scare him to tears. At that time he will already be able to conquer the sky. The reason why a Sky Knight was called a Sky Knight was because they had already mastered high-level battle energy. When battle energy was released, they could fly in the air for a short period of time. Although they could not fly freely like birds, the short leap was enough to ensure that they could quickly attack anyone or anything within a few hundred meters of them. After visiting the Black Tulip Field, Levis had already sent most of the nobles away. Those who stayed were on good terms with him. List was also preparing to leave. He did not intend to spend the night in Tulip Castle, so he directly called Levis to the study to discuss some matters. List, can't we talk about it at night? There are still many people in the living room that I need to entertain. Brother, I don't intend to stay here for the night. After discussing things with you, I will go back. So urgent? There are many things in town waiting for me to deal with. Alright, what do you want to talk to me about? Teacher Frank has already brought you to see the Black Tulip Plantation. The slave trading fleet will have to wait at least more than a month before they can return. I'm not talking about this. I have something else to talk to you about. List wanted to talk about seafood, but it did not feel very impactful to say it directly. He had to first lay the groundwork and whet Levis's appetite before discussing seafood as a shareholder. After thinking for a while, he said, I have mastered a new magic potion. What? Levis was shocked. You have a new tulip magic potion? Not tulip, it's a mushroom, a flame mushroom, a magic potion mushroom. List was very satisfied with Levis's expression. Do you need a cooperation, my dear brother? Cooperation? We are blood brothers, the best cooperation partners, isn't it? Of course. Then how do you intend to cooperate? Are you still following the Black Tulip model? Are you going to cooperate with me personally? I don't like to give benefits to Madame Marie and Lytton. Therefore, I will still cooperate with you, brother. However, this time I am only going to sell the finished flame mushrooms to you. You will be the seller of the flame mushrooms and will not be involved in the cultivation of the flame mushrooms. List stated the cooperation plan that he had thought of. He wanted to make the flame mushrooms a specialty of the flower town and did not intend to directly sell the cultivation technique. This is not appropriate. How many flame mushrooms can be grown in the flower town? Sell me the cultivation technique, I will produce them, and a share of the sales would be great. I am in urgent need of gold coins to buy serfs. Otherwise, a share of the sales would also be acceptable. If you can directly give me 5,000 gold coins, then I can even directly sell you the cultivation technique of the flame mushrooms without any subsequent share. You only need to help me sell the flame mushrooms I produce in the future. 5,000 gold coins? Levis sighed, I can't even take out 1,000 gold coins. Forget it, let's directly sell the finished product. Without haggling too much, the cooperation was thus reached. Soon after, List said, Brother, have you found a saltpeter mine? No, I have searched all the cities, yet no one has found similar ores. You really are a lucky guy. Why do you always run into good things? Maybe good things come to good people. By the way, brother, I still have a business that I want to cooperate with you. Levis's eyes shone. What business? His younger brother, who had suddenly become mature, had already brought him too many surprises. Just the Black Tulip and the flame mushrooms alone were equivalent to increasing his chances of promoting to a Sky Knight by 20%. This made him full of confidence in being a medicine pot. Seafood business. I have already prepared to station caravans in all the cities of the Coral Island to sell seafood. However, seafood fishing is not a technical job. There will always be people who will jump out and compete with me for the hard-earned money. Therefore, I intend to give you 20% of the shares in exchange for you to help me get a permit to sell seafood on the Coral Island. He wanted to monopolize the seafood business and legalize it, directly cutting off the possibility of other people's business. The seafood market is not small. I heard that you can now earn several gold coins a day? Levis said carelessly. I don't know where brother heard that, but I can't even earn a single gold coin a day. Maybe later, when I start selling it in all the cities, I can earn 2 gold coins a day? List first complained about being poor, then threatened, if you don't help me, I will ask father to help me get one. I just want to earn a bit of hard-earned money to buy white bread to eat, that's all, brother. Perhaps the Count really did not like List. However, if List really begged, the Count should not refuse. After all, this business was opened up by List. Alright, but I want 30% of the shares. The decree will be issued tomorrow. When father left, he asked me to temporarily take over the management of the Coral Island. Levis took a puff from his cigar and said with a beaming smile. Greed. Liszt inwardly despised him, but on the surface he said, all right, 30% it is. Chapter 104. What is this? Levis picked up the black pearl and weighed it in his hand. Does it have magic power? It feels like it has water attribute magic power. It does indeed have magic power. It is a pearl. Pearl? Levis shook his head. Don't think that I have never seen pearls. The pearl ornaments that I have given out are not few in number. I once took a boat tour on the Blue Dragon Island's tranquil lake and even dug out pearls from pearl oysters. They were white and not this big. This is a black pearl, dug out from another kind of giant clam. Giant clam? Is it produced in the Flower Town? Levis caught the point. The Flower Town's production was too rich. In fact, the waves brought the corpse of a huge squid. There was a giant clam inside the corpse, and a black pearl was dug out from the giant clam. Brother, regardless of whether it is a pearl or not, what do you think of its value? Water attribute magic power treasures are more precious than white pearls. Are you going to give it to me? Don't be so greedy. I have already given you a birthday present. This black pearl is a treasure that I carry with me. It can help me calm my restless emotions. The effect is dozens of times better than that of white pearls. I would like to ask you if you are interested in buying it. After all, I have fire attribute chi while you have water attribute chi. That is true. Compared to white pearls, the black pearl gives me a more comfortable feeling. How many gold coins are you going to sell it for? On the market, white pearls of the same size are worth about a few gold coins. I will buy it for 10 gold coins. How about it? 10 is too little. It is not little, Liszt. No matter how much it calms down, it is just an ornament. Perhaps wizards can forge it into magic equipment. It has excellent magic power storage, suitable for forging magic equipment. There are no wizards in my Flower Town, but I believe that you, brother, must have some connection with wizards. Why not ask a wizard to help you forge a magic equipment? Levis shook his head. If it had more magic power, then it could indeed be forged into magic equipment. However, it does not have enough magic power, so it would be difficult to forge a useful magic equipment. Cough, cough. In fact, Liszt then revealed his true purpose. He drew a circle with his hand, which was the size of a big bowl. I also have a black pearl of this size. It contains rich magic power and is absolutely suitable for making magic equipment. Water attribute magic power is naturally suitable for you, brother. A bigger black pearl? So big? Levis was no longer calm. Although fist-sized black pearls were rare, they were at most an interesting accessory. Bowl-sized black pearls, on the other hand, were different. If he really had such a large black pearl, coupled with the dense mana, it would definitely be a good material for mana equipment. Those mages would spend a lot of money to buy it for research just because of its rarity. 500 gold coins. I'll sell you the black pearl. I want to take a look at the black pearl. First, Liszt called his valet Thomas, and asked him to fetch the bowl-sized black pearls from Marcus. A moment later, a slightly irregularly shaped, gigantic black pearl appeared on the table in the study. Rubbing the huge black pearl, Levis's eyes kept glowing. Compared with the inexperienced Liszt, he knew the value of this treasure better, so he gave his offer. I'll buy it for 100 gold coins. This is a novelty. Although it is rich in magic power, there is no guarantee that it really has development value. I can't risk buying something that can't be used. What he said made sense. Liszt wasn't sure if the black pearl could really forge magic equipment. But bargaining was still necessary. After several back and forth, the black pearl was finally sold for 280 gold coins. In addition, the fist-sized black pearl in his hand was also included in the transaction as an accessory. After the transaction, Liszt smiled and said, "Brother, let me know when you're done with the magic equipment. I want to see what it's used for. This is also the first time I've come in contact with black pearls." After determining the use of the black pearls, the real value of the remaining ones could be calculated. No problem. Just as he was about to leave the study, Liszt suddenly remembered something and asked, "By the way, brother, has Tulip Castle bought any new books recently?" "No, since when did you like reading so much? I'd rather drink until dawn than stay in the study and read those dazzling words. There is a lot of interesting knowledge hidden in the books." "Knowledge?" Levis laughed. "Liszt, do you want to change careers and become a mage? That's not a good idea. I often deal with those mages. They are all eccentric lunatics who talk about knowledge and exploration. The glory of a knight is always won on horseback." Liszt walked quickly out of the study. There was a house of gold and books, and there was a beauty in books. As a cultured man, he didn't want to lower himself to the same level as the other party. The cooperation had been confirmed. List said goodbye to Levis and left Tulip Castle. However, he did not go back directly. Instead, he walked along the path to an independent castle next to Coral City. It was Madame Penelope's residence. Since he had come to Coral City, he had to see his grandmother. The castle was covered with creepers. It added a lot of ancient aura to the castle, as well as a bit of inexplicable gloom. There was a platform on the second floor of the castle, which was covered with flowers and plants. Madame Penelope's life, apart from aristocratic socializing, was mostly spent on these flowers and plants. While watering the flowers, she chatted, "You came out of the castle so soon. Didn't Levis ask you to stay for dinner to continue the celebration?" I refused. There are still many things in Flower Town that I cannot do without. A qualified lord always keeps himself busy. As long as people are busy, they will feel fulfilled and effectively prevent their life from degenerating. Your father has been busy all day at your grandfather's side since he was a child. That is why he could become a count before the age of 30. Madame Penelope turned around and continued watering the flowers. Unfortunately, ever since he married two troublesome daughters-in-law, he hasn't been able to go any further. I really hope that your brother can sober up a bit, but that little guy is also a fool. The youngest daughter of Marquis Roderick is a troublesome person. Marquis Roderick, one of the Grand Duchy's 7 marquises, served in the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry, and was the vice-commander. No wonder Levis was still unmarried. It turned out that he had taken a fancy to the Marquis' daughter. Cousin Meopel is deeply in love with the little princess, while elder brother is in love with Marquis Roderick's daughter. It seems that both of them have their own ideas. The same goes for you. Me. Don't think that just because I am old, I won't be able to hear news about you, Athena Salmon, right? I heard from Elvira that it is a very lovely little girl who admires you endlessly, yet you actually refused her. She is the daughter of a viscount. Although fish sellers are rather vulgar, but with gold coins you can still eat white bread, right? Hee hee. Lys didn't want to say anything more. Madame Penelope continued to ramble on about young people are insensible, and the like. But soon she turned her attention to her pot of flowers. Chapter 105. Black nightshade was said to be a close relative of eggplant, a plant that bore small black berries, the fruit of which was very tasty. When he was young there were a lot of wild black nightshades growing in the fields, which Lys liked to eat very much. He didn't know if the black nightshade in Madame Penelope's flower pot was a species he was familiar with. But when he heard that the plant was sick, he immediately stepped forward out of habit, unleashed magic eyes and took a look at the dying black nightshade. When he glanced at it, he seemed to see a faint flow of magic power, but it was just a flash before quickly disappearing. He was pleasantly surprised. Magic power meant that this black nightshade was unusual. It isn't going to breed another sprite worm, right? Although List was excited, he didn't show it on the surface. He just continued to size up the black nightshade. The black nightshade was already on the verge of death. Its leaves were yellow, its rhizome was covered with black spots, and there were a few flower buds on the verge of withering. But when he scanned it with magic eyes, he quickly found that the flow of magic power was very weak, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Without careful observation, he simply couldn't detect any traces of magic power. He was clear. It is unlikely to be a magic ingredient. It is most likely that the black nightshade is going to breed a sprite worm. Poor black nightshade, I don't know what kind of disease it has contracted. It has already been a week, but it still hasn't come back to life. Watching it wither day by day just like me, it's really hard to bear. Madame Penelope was still nagging as she sprayed the black nightshade with water. Grandmother, you are very healthy, showing no signs of aging. List said, pretending to be relaxed. Since you feel sad when you look at the black nightshade, you might as well give it to me to raise. Perhaps the Flower Town's climate can revive it. If not, then I will give you a new pot of black nightshade. I'm very happy that you think so. Let's take good care of it. Of course. With ease, a pot of black nightshade, which was suspected to be breeding a sprite worm, was handed over to List. In a hurry to take care of the black nightshade, List quickly took his leave, rendezvoused with his retainer knight, and hurried back to the Flower Town. When he arrived at the Flower Town, it was already sunset in the afternoon. The red glow of the sunset rippled on the horizon. The morning glow did not leave the house, but the sunset glow traveled 1,000 miles. Tomorrow would be another bright and sunny day. List didn't take a break and directly ordered Gort, "Teacher Gort, mobilize all the serfs to look for black nightshade. Dig them up and send them to the stud farm. Remember, it's best to dig up the roots along with the soil, don't damage the black nightshade's roots." Taking advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark yet, he quickly found a few wild black nightshades near the stud farm. Then he moved the sick black nightshade out of the pot and planted it next to the wild black nightshade. He also ordered people to fetch some compost and watered it near the roots of the black nightshade. One by one, the wild black nightshade was dug up and planted around the diseased black nightshade, forming a small black nightshade field. "My lord, all of the nightshades that could be found before nightfall are here. Now that the sun has set, the serfs won't be able to find the black nightshade. I'll have the serfs continue to search for it tomorrow." "Sure." Candles and lanterns shone. Gort looked at the black nightshade field and asked curiously, "What's the use of these black nightshades?" Many people knew that black nightshade's berries were edible, but the fruit was too small and the output was too low, so it didn't have much value. Therefore no one planted them. Most of them grew wild in the fields. Generally, only children liked to rummage through the black nightshade berries. "It may be useful, but I can't be sure for the time being. But in any case, transplant all of the black nightshades that can be found here tomorrow." "As you wish." Back in the castle, waiting for dinner, List leaned on a chair in the living room, opened a fragrant coconut, drank the coconut milk and relaxed his body. Although the Earth Knight had a strong physique, he still felt a little tired after riding a horse all day. However, he was in a good mood and was a little excited. The worries about the seafood market were solved. Later on, just by selling seafood on the Coral Island, he could live a luxurious aristocratic life. The sales channel for the flame mushrooms had been arranged and now he just had to wait for the serfs to solve the planting technique. The black tulips were still a month away from the harvest season. The 280 gold coins from the sale of the black pearls had solved the castle's tight financial situation. He was going to buy a few more horses and carriages and expand his caravan. He would strive to expand the seafood business to every small town and reach a scale of 3 gold coins or more per day. Of course, these were the established directions. What really excited him was the black nightshade sprite worm. In addition to the enfeoffment gift, the Count gave him 4 sprite worms, and the Count rewarded him with another sprite worm for discovering the black tulip. The remaining peanut sprite worm, tomato sprite worm and fragrant coconut sprite worm were all discovered through the smoke missions. Only the black nightshade sprite worm that might exist was personally discovered by him, which gave him a sense of accomplishment. It turned out that even without relying on the smoke missions, he could still obtain his own opportunities. However, it seemed that without magic eyes, it would be very difficult for him to discover the secret of the black nightshade. Magic eyes, on the other hand, were brought to him by the smoke missions. In the end, it seemed that he had borrowed the light of the smoke missions. In any case, this is a good omen. Perhaps in the future, I can often use magic eyes to look for sprite worms that might be hidden on any plant. In his original understanding, sprite worms were very rare. The tulip family had cultivated on the Coral Island for 20 years and had only obtained a little more than 100 sprite worms, which was a very low probability. However, in a small place like the Flower Town in just half a year, he had already discovered 3 sprite worms. On a trip outside, he had also abducted a black nightshade sprite worm. This could no longer be described as good luck. It can be roughly determined that the probability of sprite worms being conceived is not low. However, due to environmental factors, a large number of sprite worms might have miscarried. There were no smoke missions. The peanut sprite worm had died long ago, and the helpless serfs could not provide the peanut sprite worm with the nutrients it needed. The tomato sprite worm might be conceived, but there was also the possibility that John Shoulderpole would directly pluck the largest tomato and eat the unborn sprite worm. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was hard to say, but with its high position and the threat of the fruit-stealing monkeys, it might also die. As for the current black nightshade sprite worm, without magic eyes to find traces of it, it was doomed to die, unable to be born. Now that I have the smoke missions and magic eyes, the sprite worms that I can find will definitely pour in. With these sprite worms, it is inevitable that I will make a fortune from farming. After the banquet, List summoned the 3 people in charge of the caravan to the castle. He told them about the seafood trade. Coral City, Baihua City, North Valley City, Yulin City, Snake Spear City, and Gravel City. Among the 6 cities of the Coral Island, 5 had already opened trade routes. Only Gravel City was too far away, making it difficult to trade. The Flower Town was at the northeasternmost end of the island, while Gravel City was at the southwesternmost end of the island, separated by more than 100 kilometers. Tomorrow, Tulip Castle will issue a seafood sales decree, which can only be obtained by the Flower Town. List put his hands behind his back and looked at the night view outside the window. There were still few lights in the Flower Town at night. Against the dark background, the stars were especially bright and sparkling. A faintly discernible Milky Way could be seen running through the sky. This probably indicated that this different world still belonged to the Milky Way. Chapter 106. The east coast was only a few kilometers in length. Although there was a lot of seafood, but due to overfishing, it wouldn't take long before the seafood was completely harvested. List was not willing to do something like draining the pond to catch the fish. He was going to implement a fishing moratorium in the Flower Town, or at least a summer moratorium. In other words, during the breeding and growth season of the dog days, the fish resources in the sea would be well protected. Of course, the summer moratorium was only a temporary measure. After the Thorns Ridge was conquered and the wharf was built at Deepwater Bay, he would promote offshore fishing. The shellfish resources at the coast were too little, so he had to protect them. However, the fishery resources at the coast were definitely enough for the entire Coral Island. Currently there was no wharf, no fishing boats and no fishermen. He could only develop the coastal fishery. Isaiah, I leave the supervision of the establishment of the Coral City's fishing team to you. I hope that it will be ready as soon as possible. Old Grandette will assist you from the side in selecting the person in charge of the maintenance of the trade routes. Spread them out as soon as possible. I will provide 50 gold coins for the rental of warehouses and the purchase of carriages and horses. Yes, Sir Baron. Isaiah accepted the order. Soon, the caravan's construction plan was discussed. It was divided into two parts. One part was to establish the flower caravan, which would be stationed in the Coral City, with Old Grandette as the caravan captain and Harpagon as the vice captain. Old Grandette mainly operated the Coral City White Birch City trade route, the Coral City Elm City trade route, the Coral City Gravel City trade route, and the Coral City Snake Spear City trade route. Harpagon was in charge of the fishing team and the castle purchasing team. The purchasing team was to purchase whatever the castle needed and transport it back to the caravan. The other part was to establish the Thorns caravan, with Sherlock as the caravan captain. The caravan mainly operated the Flower Town North Valley City trade route. The two caravans focused on different things. One focused on the seafood business, providing gold coins for the Flower Town, while the other focused on the daily trade, providing the Flower Town with various daily necessities. He got up early. He exercised and cultivated chi. List was not as diligent as when he was doing the archery mission. Leisure time always made people degenerate quietly, and aristocratic extravagance was wearing away at his fighting spirit. Dosen released the magic. When he came back from walking the dog, he watched as the servants broke the rock thorns and began to pave the road. He sighed in his heart, the life of fighting cocks and walking dogs is much more enjoyable. This, Dosen Avenue, was 60 meters long, and it would probably be completed by the end of the year. Eating well and training diligently, although Dosen was not yet an adult flying dust dog, his body was already stronger than his mother's. His magic casting was fast and precise, and he executed List's commands meticulously. It was already a very good combat helper and a loyal guard. Gigi. Gigi. On the windowsill of the castle, ear-piercing screeches accompanied by a familiar melody welcomed List's return. It was Blessed Curls singing at the top of its lungs. This wind peregrine falcon's feathers were getting darker and darker, and its length was much longer than when it was still a fledgling. For this reason, List tied a rope around its ankles. He still hadn't figured out how to train Blessed Curls. It was very likely that he would directly kill it and eat its meat so as to avoid any trouble. After tying up Dosen, List went to the black nightshade field. The wild black nightshade planted last night was a bit rusty, and had yet to adapt well to the new soil environment. The black nightshade, which was very likely to give birth to a sprite worm, was even more sick than yesterday, and its aura was much weaker. It was on the verge of withering. He released magic eyes, carefully observed, and found that the black nightshade's bud was still faintly flickering with magic power. I hope it doesn't die, or else all this effort would have been in vain. Everything that could be done had been done, and the rest could only be left to fate. There were still many wild black nightshades in the small town, which were transplanted one by one. After a whole day, Nearly all of the wild black nightshades in the small town were transplanted into the black nightshade field, covering an area of 1 mu. The serfs constantly watered, fertilized, and weeded, striving to use the most meticulous care to keep the black nightshades alive. Sir, you really should go to the thorns wormstalk shrub and take a look. The thorns there have changed overnight, and they have already grown to half a person's height. Blair gestured with his hand, indicating the craziness of the fast-growing thorns. In just a few days the thorn seedlings had immediately turned into thorns trees. But he was also a bit puzzled. But sir, I can't think of any use for them. They don't bear fruit and they can't be used as wood. Perhaps we can plant thorns on both sides of the road in the Thorns Ridge. That way wild beasts and even World of Warcraft should take a detour, not daring to casually trample on them. There is indeed a use. Let's cultivate the shrub first. List also could not think of any good use. Soon after, he inspected the fragrant coconut worm stalk and the cultivation of the flame mushroom. The fragrant coconut worm stalk was still growing, and there was not much movement. The cultivation of the flame mushroom brought him a pleasant surprise. Your wisdom and insight are simply amazing. Sir, after your guidance, the shiitake settlement serfs planted the shiitake and the flame mushroom together, and the flame mushroom successfully grew. I can't figure it out, but the flame mushroom really needs to grow together with shiitake," said Gort excitedly, pointing at the flame mushroom, which had already begun to develop from mycelium to fruiting body. His subordinate's exclamation gave List a sense of accomplishment. He just smiled faintly. After finding the reason, the next step is to cultivate the flame mushroom on a large scale. Teacher Gort, the shiitake settlement must be expanded as much as possible. If the ingredients for cultivating the flame mushroom are not enough, then have the caravan purchase them from outside. He said in a heavy tone, I need magic ingredients. As you wish, I will squeeze every bit of the serf's physical strength to cultivate an adequate amount of flame mushrooms. Wonderful red mushrooms, they will bring unimaginable wealth to the flower town. Squeezing is a must, but the treatment cannot be lacking. Tell all the shiitake serfs that as long as they can cultivate enough flame mushrooms, then the accompanying shiitake will have their taxes reduced by half. Heavens, that bunch of lowly serfs will go crazy with joy. You are truly the embodiment of benevolence. Of course I am a benevolent lord. However, List's tone changed. You also have to tell those serfs that if any of them are lazy or careless and damage the flame mushrooms, I will let them understand that aristocrats are not only generous and benevolent, but also hold a whip that can tear people apart. Gort nodded. Of course it is necessary to let them understand this. People were not machines, they were all uniformly diligent. There were always some people who were gluttonous and lazy. After barely getting by, they would not want to do any more work. List did not like such commoners. His way of thinking was already that of a qualified aristocrat. Looking at the Sir Lord's departing figure, Crooked Neck Bob was very disappointed. Anelda's reward, heavens, it was actually obtained by that old bastard Nash. That old bachelor, how could he have cultivated the flame mushrooms before me? He cursed angrily. If it wasn't for List, he wouldn't have had the guts to do so. He was cursing at Nash. The reason was very simple. After the flame mushrooms were successfully cultivated, List rewarded them according to their contributions. Nash was the first to research the appropriate ingredients. Thereupon, List rewarded Nash with a gold coin. Everyone in the shiitake settlement was envious of Nash, especially Bob, who was determined to get the reward. After cursing for a moment, you're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.